Solve this equation, and I'll marry you. The words echoed through Hawthorne Ridge University's grandest lecture hall, dripping with mockery. Dr. Camilla Hartwell, brilliant, beautiful, untouchable, stood before 300 students, her emerald eyes fixed on the janitor who dared question her mathematics. Jonas Mercer held his mop like a shield, chalk dust on his calloused hands, his daughter's medical bills crushing him from the inside. He'd abandoned his PhD 5 years ago. Now he was nobody. But the equation on that board? She'd made a mistake, and he was about to prove it. Comment below what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The fluorescent lights of Hawthorne Ridge University's Caldwell Hall hummed their midnight song, casting sterile shadows across rows of empty desks. Jonas Mercer pushed his cleaning cart through the double doors of Lecture Hall 7, the wheels squeaking in protest against the polished marble floor. The smell of industrial cleaner mixed with old books and chalk dust, a combination that had become as familiar to him as breathing. It was 11:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, he'd need to be in the East Wing. In 45 minutes, he'd clock out, drive his 15-year-old Honda Civic back to the trailer park on the edge of town, and collapse into 3 hours of sleep before Lily woke up for her medication. This was his life now. This was what remained of Jonas Mercer, once the brightest mathematical mind Columbia University had seen in a generation. He began with the trash cans, moving methodically through the rows. The lecture hall still bore the residue of the day's final class: crumpled paper, abandoned coffee cups, the occasional granola bar wrapper. Students at Hawthorne Ridge were privileged, careless with what they left behind. Jonas had learned not to judge. He'd been one of them once, in another lifetime. As he worked his way toward the front of the room, his eyes drifted, as they always did, to the massive blackboard that dominated the wall behind the lecturer's podium. Dr. Camilla Hartwell's Advanced Differential Equations class had been the last to use this hall, and she never erased her work. It was a point of pride for her, leaving complex proofs on display like artwork in a gallery, a daily reminder to students and faculty alike of her intellectual superiority. Tonight's board was a masterpiece of mathematical notation. 3 panels of dense equations, tracking the solution to what Jonas immediately recognized as a boundary value problem in partial differential equations. His hand stilled on the trash bag. Despite himself, despite the exhaustion that lived in his bones, despite everything he'd lost and left behind, he couldn't help but follow the logic. First panel. The setup. Elegant, precise. Dr. Hartwell knew how to present a problem. Second panel. The transformation. Standard technique, executed flawlessly. Third panel. The integration by parts, the application of boundary conditions, Jonas froze. His eyes tracked back, following the manipulation in line 17. Then again, more slowly. His heart rate picked up. That old familiar sensation of spotting an error. The same feeling that had once driven him to spend 72 hours straight in the Columbia Mathematics Library, existing on coffee and the pure joy of discovery. She'd made a mistake. It was subtle, the kind of error that wouldn't be obvious to a graduate student or even most professors. In applying the boundary condition, she'd assumed continuity where the problem's parameters didn't guarantee it. The solution still worked, technically, but only for a restricted subset of cases. For the general problem she'd written at the top of the board, the approach would fail. Jonas stood there, mop in hand, staring at the blackboard of one of the most respected mathematicians in the country, and felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in 5 years. The urge to engage, to participate, to belong to the world of ideas again. He shouldn't. He knew he shouldn't. This wasn't his world anymore. He'd given up that right when he'd signed the withdrawal papers at Columbia, when he'd traded his doctoral research for a janitor's wage and health insurance that would cover Lily's prescriptions. But his hand was already moving toward his pocket, pulling out the stub of chalk he'd found last week, and kept for no reason he could articulate. His feet carried him to the board. Just a small note, he told himself. Just a gentle suggestion in the corner where Dr. Hartwell would see it tomorrow. And maybe remember that mathematics belonged to everyone who loved it, not just those who could afford to stay. The chalk touched the blackboard. What the hell do you think you're doing? The voice cracked through the lecture hall like a whip. Jonas spun around, chalk falling from his fingers, his heart hammering against his ribs. Dr. Camilla Hartwell stood in the doorway, her designer coat draped over her shoulders, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. At 34, she was the youngest tenured professor in Hawthorne Ridge's mathematics department, holder of 2 Fields Medal nominations, and author of 3 books that had revolutionized applied mathematics. She was also, Jonas noted with sinking dread, absolutely furious. I asked you a question. Her heels clicked against the floor as she descended the steps between the rows of desks, each footfall sharp and deliberate. What gives you the right to touch my work? Dr. Hartwell, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to what? Vandalize my lecture materials? Pretend you understand mathematics because you've been mopping floors in this building long enough to recognize a few symbols? She reached the front of the room, her green eyes blazing. Do you have any idea how arrogant, how presumptuous it is for someone like you to think you can just... There's a mistake. The words left Jonas's mouth before he could stop them. Silence crashed over the lecture hall. Camilla's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, disbelief, and then something darker. What did you just say? Jonas's mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed at him to apologize, to grab his cart and flee, to protect the job he desperately needed. But he'd already crossed the line, and part of him, the part that had spent 4 years at Columbia proving theorems, the part that had published 6 papers before his 25th birthday, the part he'd buried but never quite killed, that part couldn't back down. Line 17, he said quietly, pointing at the board. When you applied the boundary condition, you assumed the third derivative was continuous at the interface. But the problem parameters, he gestured to the top of the board, only guarantee continuity up to the second derivative. Your solution works, but only for a special case. For the general problem as stated, you'd need a different approach. The silence stretched. Camilla stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. Then she laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound that had no humor in it. I'm sorry, I must be hallucinating. Did the janitor just try to lecture me on differential equations? She turned, and Jonas realized with horror that they weren't alone. A young woman stood in the doorway, one of Dr. Hartwell's graduate students, probably coming back for a forgotten textbook. Rachel, are you hearing this? Rachel shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between them. Dr. Hartwell, No, this is fascinating. Camilla crossed her arms, her gaze swinging back to Jonas. Please, continue. Explain to me, someone who has spent 15 years studying mathematics at MIT, Cambridge, and Princeton, where exactly I went wrong. I'm sure your extensive education in, floor maintenance, has given you unique insights. The cruelty in her voice was precise, surgical. Jonas felt his face burning. This was a mistake. Everything about this was a mistake. I shouldn't have said anything. I apologize. He bent to retrieve the fallen chalk, desperate to end this encounter. Oh no, you don't get to do that. Camilla stepped forward, blocking his path. You don't get to question my work and then slink away. If you're going to challenge me, have the courage to stand by it. Her smile was razor sharp. Unless, of course, you were just talking out of your ass, which I suspect is the case. Something in Jonas snapped. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was thinking about Lily's upcoming surgery, the bills piling up, the life he'd sacrificed slipping further away with each passing day. Maybe it was simply that he'd been invisible for too long. The boundary condition implies continuity of the solution and its derivatives up to order n1, where n is the order of the differential equation, he said, his voice steady now. Your equation is third order, so you get continuity through the second derivative. To assume third derivative continuity, you'd need additional smoothness conditions on the forcing function, which aren't present in your problem statement. He walked to the board, his movements careful and deliberate. With the chalk stub, he wrote a quick modification to her approach, showing how the solution needed to be split into cases. If you restrict to smooth forcing functions, your method works perfectly. But for the general case you wrote, here, you need to account for possible jump discontinuities in the third derivative at the boundary. The solution exists, but the representation requires weak derivatives and Sobolev space theory. He stepped back. His hand was shaking slightly, but the mathematics on the board was clean, clear, undeniable. Camilla stared at the equations. Her face had gone pale, then flushed. Rachel, still frozen in the doorway, had pulled out her phone. Was she recording this? Where did you study? Camilla's voice was quiet now, dangerous. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Where did you study? Jonas met her eyes. Columbia, PhD program in pure mathematics. I left before finishing. You left? She seized on the word like a weapon. You quit. And now you work as a janitor and think that gives you the right to... She stopped, her gaze sharpening. Wait, Jonas Mercer? His stomach dropped. She knew his name. How did she know his name? You published that paper on variational methods in 2019, the one that proposed an alternative to the Perlman approach for certain Ricci flow problems. Her eyes widened. Everyone thought you disappeared. The rumor was you'd had a breakdown, couldn't handle the pressure. I had a daughter, Jonas said flatly. She needed me more than mathematics did. How noble. The sarcasm dripped from every syllable. And now you're back, lurking around university lecture halls, correcting professors like some kind of mathematical vigilante? She laughed again, brittle and sharp. Let me tell you something, Mr. Mercer. Whatever brilliance you might have had once, you gave it up. You quit. You chose mopping floors over contributing to human knowledge. That was your choice. And you don't get to waltz back in and pretend you still belong in this world. I wasn't pretending anything, Jonas said quietly. I was cleaning the lecture hall. You're the one who asked. I asked what you were doing vandalizing my board. I didn't ask for a lecture from someone who couldn't cut it. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something intimate and vicious. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to erase whatever nonsense you've written. You're going to apologize, and you're going to remember your place. Because if you don't, I will make one phone call to facilities management, and you'll be out of a job by morning. And we both know you can't afford that, can you? The threat hung in the air between them. Jonas thought of Lily, asleep in their trailer, her medication lined up on the kitchen counter. He thought of the surgery scheduled for 6 months from now, the money he was desperately trying to save. He thought of every compromise he'd made, every piece of himself he'd sacrificed to keep her alive and safe. Then he thought of the mathematics on the board, the pure, crystalline truth of it. No, he said. Camilla blinked. Excuse me? The math is correct. I won't erase it. If you want to fire me for being right, that's your choice. His voice was calm, steadier than he felt. But I won't apologize for knowing something you didn't. For a moment, he thought she might actually hit him. Her whole body tensed, her hands clenching into fists. Rachel had definitely been recording. Her phone was raised, capturing every second of this disaster. Then Camilla smiled, and it was worse than her anger. You know what? Keep it up there. In fact, let's make this interesting. She pulled out her own phone, tapping rapidly. The Euler Challenge is in 2 weeks. Are you familiar with it? Jonas's heart sank. Of course he was familiar with it. The Euler Mathematical Challenge was the most prestigious mathematics competition in North America, drawing the best graduate students and researchers from across the continent. He dreamed of competing in it once, before reality had intervened. It's invitation only, he said. Usually, yes. But I'm on the organizing committee, and I have discretion to extend special invitations to unique candidates. Her smile widened. Congratulations, Mr. Mercer. You've just been invited to compete. I can't or won't. I thought you said the math was correct. I thought you were confident in your abilities. She tilted her head, mock innocent. Unless you were just showing off. Unless deep down you know that real mathematics, the kind done under pressure, in competition with the best minds in the field, is beyond someone who quit. It was a trap. Jonas could see the gears turning in her mind. She was going to humiliate him publicly, prove that whatever talent he'd once had was gone, rusted away by 5 years of mopping floors and changing Lily's bedsheets. He should refuse. He should walk away. What are the terms? He heard himself ask. Camilla's eyes gleamed. Simple. You compete. If you place in the top 3, I'll publicly acknowledge your correction tonight. I'll apologize for underestimating you. I'll even write a letter of recommendation if you want to go back to Columbia. And if I don't place, then you admit you were wrong tonight. You apologize to me in front of the entire mathematics department, and you stop pretending you're anything other than what you are, someone who couldn't handle the real work of mathematics. She paused. Oh, and one more thing, just to make it interesting. She stepped close enough that Jonas could smell her perfume, something expensive and cold. If you solve the final problem, the one I personally select, I'll marry you. The words hung in the air, absurd and cruel. That's not... What? Not appropriate? Not professional? She laughed. Of course it's not. It's a joke, Mr. Mercer, because we both know you won't solve it. We both know you'll fail, and then everyone will see what I see, a washed-up almost PhD who couldn't hack it, playing pretend in the one place he still feels smart. Rachel had stopped recording, her face pale. This had gone far beyond an academic dispute. Jonas should have walked away. He should have protected his job, his daughter, his carefully maintained invisibility. But 5 years of swallowing his pride, 5 years of being invisible, 5 years of remembering what it felt like to matter, all of it crystallized into a single moment of clarity. I accept, he said. Camilla's smile faltered for just a second. She hadn't expected that. You're serious? Completely. I'll compete. I'll solve whatever problem you throw at me. And when I do, you'll keep your word. Oh, I'll keep my word. The smile returned, sharper now. The question is whether you'll keep yours. 2 weeks, Mr. Mercer. I hope you've been practicing, because I'm going to design something that will break you. She brushed past him, Rachel scurrying after her. At the doorway, Camilla paused, looking back. One more thing. That video Rachel took, it'll be all over campus by morning. Everyone's going to know about this. Everyone's going to be watching. There's no backing out now. Then she was gone, her heels echoing down the hallway. Jonas stood alone in the lecture hall, staring at the equations on the board, his corrections in white chalk against Camilla's confident black notation. What had he done? What had he just agreed to? His phone buzzed, a text from Maria, his neighbor who watched Lily when he worked nights. Lily's awake, asking for you, nothing urgent, just missing Daddy. He looked at the message, then at the mathematics on the board, then at the janitor's cart waiting patiently by the door. 2 weeks. He had 2 weeks to remember who he used to be, to prove that brilliance didn't expire just because life got in the way. 2 weeks to show his daughter that sometimes you had to fight for your dignity even when the odds were impossible. 2 weeks to do the impossible. Jonas picked up his mop and went back to work. But in his mind, he was already running through theorems, reviewing techniques, dusting off neural pathways he'd thought were permanently closed. Camilla Hartwell had made a mistake tonight. Not in her mathematics, though she had. Her real mistake was assuming that Jonas Mercer had truly given up on who he was. The next morning, Jonas's phone exploded. The video had gone viral, not just across Hawthorne Ridge's campus, but across academic social media. Janitor corrects. Renowned professor was trending on Twitter. Mathematics subreddits were analyzing the board work. Someone had even created a hashtag, #JanitorProdigy. Jonas watched the numbers climb as he fed Lily her breakfast, scrambled eggs with cheese, cut into small pieces so she wouldn't strain herself chewing. The video had been edited to show just the confrontation, Camilla's mocking tone, Jonas's calm corrections, the final devastating challenge. Daddy, you're famous! Lily's 8-year-old voice was bright with excitement as she scrolled through his phone. Everyone's talking about you. It's not that simple, sweetheart. Jonas took the phone back gently. Being famous isn't always good. But you were so smart. You showed that mean lady that you know things. Lily's face fell slightly. She was mean, wasn't she? Jonas knelt down to her level. Lily looked so much like her mother, the same dark curls, the same warm brown eyes. Sarah had been gone for 3 years now, killed by a drunk driver on her way home from her second job. Some days Jonas could barely remember what her voice sounded like. Other days the grief hit him like a physical blow. She was scared, he said, finally. Sometimes when people are scared, they say mean things. Why was she scared of you? How to explain this to an 8-year-old? How to explain that academic prestige was a fragile thing, that Camilla had built her identity on being the smartest person in every room, that his very existence threatened her carefully constructed world? Sometimes people spend a long time becoming good at something, Jonas said. And when someone else is also good at it, someone they didn't expect, it makes them worried that maybe they're not as special as they thought. Lily considered this, absently picking at her eggs. She'd barely eaten half of them, but Jonas didn't push. Her appetite had been declining lately, another side effect of her condition. "Are you going to do the competition?" she asked. "I don't know, baby. It's complicated." "Because of me?" The question hit him like a punch to the gut. "What?" "No, Lily, why would you—" "I heard Mrs. Henderson talking to you last week about the surgery money, about how we don't have enough." Her voice was small, scared. "If you do the competition, you can't work. And if you can't work, we can't save money for my heart." Jonas pulled her into a hug, feeling her tiny body against his, the fragile bird bone lightness of her. "Listen to me. You are the most important thing in my entire world. Whatever happens with this competition, with anything else, that doesn't change, okay?" She nodded against his shoulder, but he could feel her uncertainty. The truth was, Lily had a point. The Euler Challenge was a week-long event, preliminary rounds, semifinals, and finals. He'd have to take unpaid leave from his janitorial job. They'd lose a week's wages, maybe 2 if he counted preparation time, money they desperately needed. But the prize for placing in the top 3 was $50,000. $50,000 would cover Lily's surgery completely, with money left over for the medication she'd need during recovery. It would buy them 6 months of security, maybe more. It was insane to think he could win. He hadn't done serious mathematics in 5 years, hadn't competed against other mathematicians in longer than that. Camilla would have access to resources, preparation materials, inside knowledge of how the competition worked. She'd been on the organizing committee for 3 years. And yet, that night in the lecture hall, the mathematics had come back to him like breathing. The joy of it, the precision, the elegance. For those few minutes, he hadn't been Jonas Mercer, the janitor, struggling single father, invisible man. He'd been Jonas Mercer, the mathematician, the person he'd worked so hard to become before life had other plans. His phone buzzed again. Another message, but this one different from the flood of social media notifications. A blocked number. "Mr. Mercer. This is Dr. Celine March, head judge for the Euler Challenge. I saw the video. I'd like to speak with you before you make any decisions. Please call me at your earliest convenience." Jonas stared at the message. Celine March. Even out of the academic world, he knew that name. She was a legend, one of the greatest living mathematicians, known for her work in algebraic topology and her fierce advocacy for unconventional talent. She was also, Jonas remembered with a jolt, his former doctoral advisor at Columbia. The woman who'd tried to convince him to stay, who'd offered to help find funding, who'd looked at him with something like heartbreak when he'd signed the withdrawal papers. The woman he'd avoided for 5 years because facing her meant facing everything he'd lost. Jonas called her from the university library during his lunch break. The mathematics section was on the 4th floor, dusty and underpopulated. Students at Hawthorne Ridge preferred digital resources. Up here, surrounded by decades of accumulated knowledge, Jonas could almost pretend he belonged. Dr. March answered on the first ring. "Jonas, it's good to hear your voice." He'd forgotten how warm she sounded, how much like a grandmother despite being one of the most intimidating intellects in modern mathematics. "Dr. March, I wasn't expecting to hear from you." "No, I imagine not. You've been quite good at disappearing." No accusation in her tone, just statement of fact. "But it seems you've reappeared rather spectacularly. That video has caused quite a stir." "I didn't mean for that to happen." "I know you didn't, which is part of why I'm calling." A pause, the sound of papers rustling. "Jonas, I need to ask you something directly. Did Camilla Hartwell truly challenge you to compete in the Euler Challenge, or is that social media exaggeration?" "She did." "With the marriage condition?" Despite everything, Jonas almost laughed. "That part was a joke, a cruel one, but a joke. The real terms are simpler. If I place top 3, she acknowledges she was wrong. If I don't, I apologize and admit I've lost whatever ability I had." Dr. March was quiet for a moment. Jonas, I need to tell you something about Camilla Hartwell. She's brilliant, genuinely brilliant, but she's also been under enormous pressure. Her department is being threatened with budget cuts. She's been using her prestige to keep her research group funded. An incident like this being corrected by a janitor. I understand, Jonas said, though he wasn't sure he did. I'm not excusing her behavior. What she did was unprofessional and cruel, but I want you to understand the context. Another pause. More importantly, I want to know if you're actually going to compete. I don't know. Because of money? How did you Jonas, I was your advisor. I know why you left. Your daughter's medical expenses, your wife's death, the impossible choice between your career and your family. I know all of it, and I'm sorry I didn't do more to help you then. Jonas closed his eyes, gripping the phone tighter. There was nothing you could have done. Perhaps, but there's something I can do now. The Euler Challenge offers a fellowship to anyone who places in the top 3, $50,000 plus a research position. If you compete and win, it could change your life. If I win, Dr. March, I haven't done serious mathematics in 5 years. I watched that video, Jonas. I saw your board work. You haven't lost a damn thing. Her voice turned fierce. You know what I see when I look at you? I see the same young man who walked into my office 7 years ago with a completely novel approach to variational problems. The same person who published 6 papers before most PhD students had finished their coursework. You didn't lose your ability. You put it aside for something more important. That's not the same thing. I have a daughter to take care of. I can't risk my job for it. For what? For pride? For mathematics? For the chance to show the world, and more importantly, show yourself, that you still matter? She softened. Jonas, I understand you're scared. I understand the stakes. But let me ask you this. What will you tell Lily when she's older? Will you tell her that when someone challenged you, when someone tried to make you feel small, you walked away? Or will you tell her that you fought? The words hit home harder than Jonas expected. He thought of Lily this morning, worried that she was holding him back. He thought of the years ahead, watching his daughter grow up, trying to teach her to be brave when he'd chosen safety over everything else. The competition is in 2 weeks, he said finally. Even if I wanted to compete, I couldn't prepare in time. Not while working full-time. What if you didn't have to work? Dr. March, I've already spoken to the Euler Challenge Committee. If you agree to compete, we'll provide a preparation stipend. 2 weeks' wages, enough to cover your lost income plus your daughter's expenses. You'd have time to study, to remember, to get ready. Jonas's hands were shaking. Why would you do that? Because mathematics needs people like you, Jonas. Not just the ones who can afford to stay. Not just the privileged ones with trust funds and family money. Mathematics needs the people who fight for it, who choose it even when it costs them everything. Dr. March's voice cracked slightly. And because I failed you once, I'm not going to fail you again. This is insane, Yes, it probably is. But I've been in mathematics for 43 years, and I can tell you that the greatest mathematicians are always a little insane. They're the ones who see problems no one else sees, who refuse to accept that something is impossible, who keep pushing even when the whole world tells them to stop. Jonas looked around the empty library floor at the books that represented centuries of human knowledge, all that accumulated brilliance. Somewhere in this building, Camilla Hartwell was probably in her office, secure in her position, confident that she'd already won. If I do this, he said slowly, and I fail, then you fail. And Lily will see that her father tried, that he stood up for himself, that he didn't let anyone make him feel less than he is. Is that really worse than walking away? No, it wasn't worse. It was terrifying, but it wasn't worse. Okay, Jonas said, I'll compete. Good. He could hear the smile in Dr. March's voice. Now, let's talk about how we're going to make sure you win. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Jonas requested leave from his janitorial supervisor, a confused man named Rick, who'd probably never expected his most reliable employee to need time off for a mathematics competition. The stipend from Dr. March arrived the next day, exactly as promised. enough to cover their bills, Lily's medications, and even a little extra. He arranged for Maria to watch Lily after school, explaining the situation in the vaguest possible terms. Maria, a retired schoolteacher with infinite patience and a genuine love for Lily, agreed immediately. "You go show them what you're made of," she'd said, patting his hand. "That little girl needs to see her daddy shine." And then Jonas dove into mathematics like a drowning man finding air. It was harder than he'd expected. Not the concepts themselves, those came back with surprising speed, but the stamina, the ability to focus for hours at a time, to hold complex structures in his mind without losing track of the details. His brain felt rusty, cobwebbed, like a machine that had been in storage too long. Dr. March sent him practice problems, each one calibrated to push him slightly beyond his current limit. They spoke on the phone every evening, sometimes for hours, walking through solutions, discussing strategy, remembering the pure joy of mathematical discovery. "You're going to see 3 types of problems," she explained on day 4. "Classical problems that test your technical knowledge. These are about speed and accuracy. Creative problems that require novel approaches. These are about insight. And then there's the final problem, the one Camilla chooses." "Yes, Jonas, I need you to understand something about the final problem. It's not just about difficulty. It's about breaking people. Every year, the head judges select something that will separate the truly exceptional from the merely excellent. Camilla will have input on this year's problem, and given your situation, she'll choose something designed specifically to defeat you. That doesn't seem fair." "It's not, but mathematics rarely is." Dr. March sighed. "The good news is that I know how Camilla thinks. She's a classical analyst, elegant, rigorous, but somewhat orthodox in her approach. She'll choose something that plays to her strengths, which means partial differential equations or variational methods, which are also my strengths." Exactly. She's too proud to choose something outside her expertise, even if it would be strategically smarter. That's your advantage. Jonas spent his mornings in the university library, working through old competition problems. Afternoons he spent with Lily, helping with homework, playing games, trying to pretend that his stomach wasn't in knots about what was coming. Evenings, after she fell asleep, he studied, pushing through exhaustion, filling notebook after notebook with calculations, feeling his mind slowly rewire itself back into the patterns of deep mathematical thought. On day 7, he ran into Camilla. It was inevitable, really. Hawthorne Ridge wasn't that large a campus, and Jonas had been spending time in the mathematics building. He'd just finished a session in the graduate student lounge, a small act of defiance, studying in space he wasn't technically supposed to use, when she appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Mercer." Her voice was carefully neutral, but her eyes were cold. "I heard you'd been haunting our building. Preparing for your humiliation?" Jonas closed his notebook. "Just studying." "How noble. Tell me, is your daughter aware that you're about to embarrass yourself in front of the entire mathematical community? Does she know that after you fail, you'll have to grovel and apologize, and probably lose your job anyway because no one will take you seriously anymore?" "Lily knows I'm competing. She's proud of me." Something flickered across Camilla's face. Surprise, discomfort. It vanished quickly. "Pride won't pay for her medical bills." "No, the $50,000 prize will." Camilla laughed, sharp and cutting. "You actually think you're going to win. That's adorable. Jonas, let me explain something to you. I have spent 3 years studying how the Euler challenge works. I know every judge, every format, every type of problem they favor. I have been preparing for this competition for months. You have 2 weeks. "Then why are you here?" Jonas asked quietly. "If you're so confident I'll fail, why bother threatening me?" Her jaw tightened. "I'm not threatening you. I'm warning you. There's still time to back out. Tell everyone you reconsidered, that you realized you were out of your depth. No one would blame you. You could keep your job, your dignity, and avoid the spectacle that's coming. Why do you want me to quit so badly?" "Because watching you fail will be painful." The words burst out of her, raw and honest. "Because despite everything, I remember your papers. I remember thinking that Jonas Mercer might actually contribute something meaningful to mathematics. And now I'm going to have to destroy you publicly. And a part of me hates that, okay? A part of me wishes you'd just stayed quiet, stayed invisible, stayed in whatever comfortable delusion let you pretend you were still a mathematician. The silence in the lounge was absolute. Jonas stood slowly, gathering his notebooks. Dr. Hartwell, I don't think you understand. I'm not competing against you. I'm competing for my daughter, for the chance to give her the surgery she needs without drowning in debt, for the opportunity to show her that her father didn't give up on himself completely. So no, I'm not backing out. And when I solve that final problem, when I prove that brilliance doesn't have an expiration date, I hope you'll have the grace to keep your word. He walked past her, close enough to see that her hands were shaking slightly. I'm going to destroy you, she whispered. You're going to try, Jonas said. That's not the same thing. The day before the competition, Jonas took Lily to the park. It was her favorite place, a small green space near the trailer park with swings and a rusty merry-go-round. Jonas pushed her gently, watching her laugh as the swing arced through the air. She couldn't go too high. Her heart condition meant limiting physical exertion, but within safe limits, she was still a kid, still capable of joy. Daddy? She called as he caught the swing, slowing her down. Are you scared about tomorrow? Terrified, Jonas admitted. But that's okay. Being scared doesn't mean you can't do something. Lily thought about this as he helped her off the swing. They walked to a bench, sitting together in the afternoon sun. Mom would be proud of you, Lily said suddenly. Jonas's throat tightened. Yeah? Yeah, she always said you were the smartest person she ever met. She used to tell me stories about how you'd explain math to her, and even though she didn't understand it, she loved watching you talk about it because you got so happy. I didn't know she told you that. She told me lots of things. Lily leaned against him. She said that when you loved something, really loved it, it made you light up from the inside. She said that's how she knew she wanted to marry you, because you cared so much about everything. Jonas pulled her close, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo. I love you more than anything, Lily. More than mathematics, more than anything else in this world. I know, Daddy. That's why you have to win tomorrow. Sweetheart, I might not. You have to win, she insisted, pulling back to look at him with fierce, serious eyes. Not for the money. Not even for my surgery. You have to win because if you don't, you'll always wonder if you could have. And that will make you sad. And I don't want you to be sad. How did 8-year-olds become so wise? When did you get so smart? Jonas asked, tickling her gently until she giggled. I learned from you, she said simply. That night, Jonas sat at their tiny kitchen table, reviewing his notes one last time. Tomorrow morning, the competition would begin. Preliminary rounds testing speed and accuracy on classical problems. Then semifinals separating the exceptional from the merely excellent. And finally, if he made it that far, the final problem. The impossible problem. The one designed to break him. His phone buzzed. A message from Dr. March. Remember, mathematics is not about being the fastest or the cleverest. It's about being the most honest, the most willing to follow an idea wherever it leads. Trust yourself, Jonas. You belong in that room. Another message. This one from an unknown number. Good luck tomorrow, Mr. Mercer. I'll be watching. And when you fail, I'll be there to collect your apology. Dr. Hartwell. Jonas turned off his phone. He walked into Lily's room, watching her sleep in the glow of her nightlight. Her breathing was steady, peaceful. On her nightstand, she'd arranged her favorite stuffed animals in what she called a cheer squad. Apparently, they'd be rooting for him tomorrow. I'm going to try, he whispered to her sleeping form. I'm going to try as hard as I can, and no matter what happens, I want you to know that you made me brave enough to do this. He kissed her forehead and retreated to his own room. Sleep, when it finally came, was restless and full of dreams about equations that twisted into impossible shapes, about lecture halls that stretched into infinity, about Camilla's mocking smile and the weight of expectations he could never quite carry. Tomorrow would decide everything. Tomorrow would prove whether Jonas Mercer was truly finished, or whether brilliance, real brilliance, was something you carried inside you forever, dormant but never truly dead. Tomorrow would show the world that genius could wear any uniform. And as the dawn light crept through his window, Jonas felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in 5 long years. Hope. The Euler Challenge took place in the Ashford Convention Center, a sprawling glass and steel structure in downtown Boston that seemed designed to make everyone inside feel simultaneously important and insignificant. Jonas arrived at 7 in the morning, 2 hours before the preliminary rounds would begin, his hands trembling slightly as he pushed through the revolving doors into the marble-floored lobby. The space was already filling with competitors. Jonas recognized the type immediately: young, confident, most of them in their mid-20s, wearing university hoodies from MIT, Stanford, Princeton, Cambridge. They moved in clusters, discussing papers and professors with the easy camaraderie of people who knew they belonged. Graduate students with grants and stipends, postdocs with publications, a few young professors looking to make names for themselves. And then there was Jonas, 32 years old, wearing a Goodwill button-down shirt and carrying a backpack that had once belonged to Sarah. He felt like an imposter before he'd even registered. "Jonas Mercer?" A young woman with a clipboard approached him, her smile professional and practiced. Her name tag read, Emily, competition coordinator. Behind her, Jonas could see a registration desk where other competitors were collecting badges and information packets. "Yes, that's me." Emily's smile brightened, becoming genuine. "Oh my God, you're the janitor. I mean, not that you're just a janitor. I saw the video. Everyone's been talking about you. This is so exciting." She caught herself, blushing. "Sorry, that was unprofessional. Let me get you checked in." She led him to the registration desk, still chattering. "You've created quite a buzz, you know. Half the people here think you're going to be amazing, and the other half think you're going to crash and burn." "Oh God, sorry. That was also inappropriate. I really need to learn when to stop talking." Despite his nerves, Jonas found himself smiling. "It's okay. I'm pretty sure both halves might be right." "Well, either way, it's going to be interesting." Emily handed him a badge with his name and competitor number, 247. "You're in the Hawthorne bracket for preliminaries. Pure coincidence on the name, I swear. Dr. March specifically requested that you be assigned to her observation group." "Dr. March is here?" "She's one of the head judges. Didn't you know?" Emily consulted her clipboard. "Actually, looking at the panel, you've got quite the audience. Dr. March, Dr. Richardson from Yale, and..." She paused, her expression becoming carefully neutral. "Dr. Hartwell from Hawthorne Ridge University." Of course. Camilla would be judging. She'd want a front-row seat to his failure. Jonas took the badge and information packet, thanking Emily before moving away from the desk. The packet contained a schedule, competition rules, and a map of the facility. Preliminary rounds would take place in several large conference rooms, each with about 50 competitors. Problems would be projected on screens, and contestants would work at individual stations. 3 hours, 10 problems, increasing in difficulty. The top 20% from each bracket would advance to semifinals the next day. From there, the top 10 would compete in the finals. Simple. Brutal. Designed to expose any weakness. Jonas found a quiet corner near a window and tried to steady his breathing. He'd spent 2 weeks preparing, but now, surrounded by people half his age who'd never left academia, never spent 5 years mopping floors and wondering if they'd completely wasted their potential, the old doubts came flooding back. "You look like you might throw up." Jonas turned to find a young man, early 20s, wearing a Berkeley hoodie, grinning at him. He had the kind of face that had probably never known real worry, all easy confidence and assumptions of success. "Just nervous," Jonas said. "First time at the Euler Challenge?" The young man extended his hand. "Alex Chen, third-year PhD at Berkeley, specializing in algebraic geometry." "Jonas Mercer." He shook the offered hand, noting the firmness of the grip, the way Alex's eyes cataloged him, making assessments. "Wait, Mercer, you're the janitor guy." Alex's grin widened. "Dude, that video was insane. Is it true that Dr. Hartwell actually challenged you to marry her if you win?" That part was a joke. Still, ballsy move calling her out like that. Everyone here's been taking bets on whether you'll make it past preliminaries. Alex seemed to realize how that sounded. "No offense, man. It's just, you're kind of the underdog story, and people love that shit." "What are the odds?" "On you making it through? 3-1 against. But hey, I put $20 on you making semifinals, so prove me right, yeah?" Before Jonas could respond, a chime sounded through the lobby's speaker system. A calm, professional voice announced, "Good morning, competitors. Preliminary rounds will begin in 30 minutes. Please proceed to your assigned brackets. Electronic devices must be surrendered at the door. Best of luck to everyone." The lobby erupted into motion. Alex clapped Jonas on the shoulder. "See you on the other side, maybe," and disappeared into the crowd. Jonas followed the flow of people toward the Hawthorne bracket room, his heart hammering against his ribs. The conference room was enormous, filled with rows of individual workstations, each equipped with a desk, chair, blank paper, pencils, and a small digital timer. At the front of the room, 3 judges sat at an elevated table. Dr. March, looking serene and encouraging, Dr. Richardson, a stern-faced man in his 60s, and Camilla Hartwell, who spotted Jonas immediately and smiled like a predator watching prey enter its territory. Jonas found his station, number 247, near the middle of the room, and sat down. Around him, other competitors were settling in, some doing breathing exercises, others reviewing notes until the last possible moment. A young woman 2 stations over was crying silently, already overwhelmed. A man near the front looked like he might actually be meditating. "Welcome to the preliminary round of the Euler Mathematical Challenge." Dr. March's voice carried through the room without need for amplification. She stood, commanding attention effortlessly. "You are here because you represent the finest mathematical minds of your generation. Over the next 3 hours, you will face 10 problems designed to test your technical knowledge, creative thinking, and ability to perform under pressure. The top 20% will advance to semifinals. The rest will leave with our gratitude and respect for competing." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. When her eyes found Jonas, she nodded almost imperceptibly. "Remember, mathematics is not a race. Speed without understanding is worthless. Take your time, trust your knowledge, and show us what you can do." Another pause. "Dr. Richardson will now review the rules." Richardson stood, all business. "No collaboration, no electronic devices, no reference materials beyond what's provided. You may use any solution method you wish, but your work must be shown completely. Partial credit will be awarded for correct methodology, even with computational errors. When you complete a problem, place your solution in the envelope at your station. You may leave when all 10 envelopes are sealed or when time expires. Questions?" No one raised their hand. "Very well. Timers will begin in 60 seconds. First problem will display momentarily." Richardson sat down. Camilla remained standing. "One final note," she said, her voice silk over steel. "This competition has a proud tradition of excellence. We expect all competitors to rise to that standard, regardless of their background." Her eyes locked on Jonas. "Those who cannot will be quickly exposed. Good luck." The screens flickered to life. Jonas's timer beeped softly, beginning its countdown. 03 Onpois out. The first problem appeared. It was a classical differential equation, the kind Jonas had solved 1,000 times in graduate school. Find the general solution to a second-order linear equation with specific boundary conditions. Standard technique, methodical process. He picked up his pencil and began to work. The muscle memory came back immediately. Setting up the characteristic equation, finding the roots, applying the boundary conditions to determine constants. His hand moved across the paper in smooth, practiced motions. 7 minutes later, he sealed his first envelope. Around him, other competitors were still working. Good. He was keeping pace. The second problem was trickier, a combinatorial question about graph theory, requiring insight more than raw computation. Jonas stared at it for a moment, letting his mind relax, refusing to force the solution. Then he saw it. A symmetry in the problem structure that reduced the complexity dramatically. 12 minutes. Third problem. Integration by parts with a nasty trigonometric substitution. Tedious but straightforward. 9 minutes. Fourth problem. A probability question involving conditional expectations. Jonas felt a moment of panic. Probability had never been his strongest area, but he worked through it methodically, checking each step twice. 17 minutes. He was 45 minutes into the exam with 4 problems completed. The room had grown quieter as competitors settled into their work. Jonas allowed himself a glance around. The young woman who'd been crying was gone, her station empty. Several others looked frustrated, erasing and rewriting. A few, like the meditating man, appeared calm and focused. Fifth problem appeared on his screen, a question about Banach spaces and fixed-point theorems. Jonas felt something click in his brain. This was topology, real analysis, the foundations of functional analysis. This was his territory. He lost himself in the problem, barely aware of time passing. The solution unfolded like a flower opening, each step leading naturally to the next. When he finished, he realized he'd been smiling. 23 minutes, but it had felt like 5. Halfway through. 5 more problems. The sixth problem was computational, a nasty determinant calculation that required careful organization. Jonas worked through it with deliberate precision, double-checking each arithmetic step. 15 minutes. Seventh problem, vector calculus. Green's theorem applied to a parametric surface. Standard technique, but the parametrization was clever, designed to trap careless mistakes. Jonas took his time, verifying each transformation. 19 minutes. He was 2 hours in, 3 problems remaining, and the difficulty was clearly ramping up. The eighth problem made him pause. It was a question about measure theory, specifically about constructing a non-measurable set. The problem was asking him to prove something that seemed almost deliberately counterintuitive. Jonas sat back, thinking. This wasn't about computation. This was about understanding the deep structure of mathematics, about seeing why certain pathological objects must exist. He thought about the axiom of choice, about well-ordering, about the construction that Vitali had first proposed over a century ago. And then he had it. The solution poured out of him, not through calculation but through pure logical argumentation, each step built on the previous, constructing the impossible set piece by piece. When he finished, he felt the same satisfaction he'd felt years ago at Columbia, proving something that felt almost like magic. 31 minutes. 2 problems left. 48 minutes remaining. The ninth problem appeared, and Jonas felt his stomach drop. It was a question about operator theory in infinite dimensional spaces, specifically about spectral decomposition of non-self-adjoint operators. This was advanced material, the kind of thing that would appear in a second-year graduate course. The problem was asking him to characterize the spectrum and prove certain properties about eigenvalue distribution. Jonas stared at the problem, his mind racing. He knew the theory, had studied it years ago, but the specific techniques were fuzzy, buried under 5 years of disuse. He started writing, developing the basic framework, but kept hitting walls. His first approach failed. His second led to a contradiction. The timer clicked below 30 minutes. Around him, other competitors were sealing envelopes, some standing to leave. A few looked triumphant, others looked defeated. Jonas forced himself to focus, to ignore everything except the mathematics in front of him. What if he transformed the problem? Instead of working in the original space, what if he embedded it in a larger space where the operator became self-adjoint? Then he could use standard spectral theory and project back. His pencil flew across the paper. The approach was working, the pieces falling into place. He could feel it coming together, that distinctive sensation of a solution crystallizing from chaos. 23 minutes left when he sealed the ninth envelope. 1 problem remaining. Jonas's hands were shaking slightly as the 10th problem loaded. This was it. The problem that would separate the top performers from everyone else. The one designed to be genuinely difficult. The screen displayed a question about variational calculus and partial differential equations. Find the critical points of a certain functional defined on a Sobolev space, characterize their stability, and prove existence of a global minimizer under specific boundary conditions. Jonas read it twice, then a third time. This was a research-level problem, the kind of thing that might appear in a journal paper. The functional was unusual, with a non-standard growth condition that made classical techniques fail. The boundary conditions were exotic, involving normal derivatives in a way that complicated the variational framework. This was exactly the kind of problem Camilla would design. 17 minutes left. Jonas began to work, trying standard approaches. Energy methods failed because of the growth condition. Direct minimization didn't work because of the boundary terms. Compactness arguments ran into trouble because the functional wasn't coercive in the obvious way. 10 minutes. The room had emptied considerably. Maybe 20 competitors remained, all hunched over their final problems. Jonas could feel Camilla's eyes on him, could imagine her satisfaction as he struggled. 7 minutes. He needed a different approach, something unconventional. He thought about the boundary conditions, about how they interacted with the functional. What if instead of treating them as constraints, he incorporated them into the functional itself through a Lagrange multiplier? Then the problem transformed into 5 minutes. His pencil moved faster, sketching the argument. It wasn't complete. There were technical details he'd need to verify, but the core insight was there. The transformed problem had better properties. The functional became coercive in the modified space. Compactness arguments worked. 2 minutes. He was writing as fast as he could, laying out the framework, indicating where the detailed computations would go. Not a complete solution, but a clear path to one, demonstrating understanding of the deep structure. Time! Dr. Richardson's voice rang out. Jonas sealed the envelope, his heart pounding. He'd finished, barely, but had he gotten it right? The final problem was still fuzzy in places, built more on intuition than rigorous proof. Around him, the remaining competitors were sealing their envelopes, some looking relieved, others devastated. Jonas stood on shaking legs and carried his envelopes to the collection box at the front of the room. As he approached, Camilla stood, intercepting him. "Well, well, you actually finished." Her voice was low enough that only he could hear. "Let's see if any of it is correct. Judges will review solutions over lunch. Results will be posted at 2 p.m. She smiled. "I do hope you have a backup plan for when you don't advance." Jonas met her eyes. "See you at semifinals, Dr. Hartwell." He walked past her, out of the conference room, into the lobby that now felt surreal and dreamlike. His legs barely carried him to a bench near the windows. He collapsed onto it, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was, how much mental energy he'd just expended. His phone, retrieved from the electronic device check, buzzed immediately with messages. Lily. "Good luck, Daddy. Me and my cheer squad are thinking about you." Maria. "However it goes, you should be proud. You showed up." Dr. March. "I watched you work. You have nothing to be ashamed of, regardless of outcome." And one more, from Alex Chen. "Dude, that last problem was insane. Nobody finished it properly. You looked like you were having a mental breakdown at your desk. Want to grab lunch?" Jonas declined lunch, too nervous to eat. Instead, he found a quiet corner and pulled out his phone, video calling Lily. Her face filled the screen, beaming. "Daddy, how did it go? Did you win?" "It's not about winning yet, sweetie. That was just the first round. I won't know if I advance until this afternoon." "But did you feel smart? Did you feel like yourself again?" The question struck him hard. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Yeah, I did." "Then you already won." Lily held up one of her stuffed animals, a threadbare rabbit named Mr. Hoppers. "See? The cheer squad says you're doing great." They talked for a few more minutes, Lily chattering about her day at school, about how Mrs. Henderson had made cookies, about the drawing she'd made of Jonas being a math superhero. Her joy, her absolute faith in him, was both sustaining and terrifying. When they disconnected, Jonas sat in his corner and waited. The lobby gradually refilled as lunch hour ended. Competitors returning, clustering in groups, sharing war stories about the preliminary problems. Jonas caught fragments of conversation. "That last problem was impossible. I just wrote down the setup and hoped for partial credit. Totally choked on the measure theory question, couldn't remember the construction. Did you see the janitor guy? He looked like he was going to pass out." At 1:50 p.m., Emily appeared with her clipboard, accompanied by several assistants carrying printed sheets. They moved to different points in the lobby, posting results on bulletin boards. The crowd surged forward. Jonas stayed where he was, unable to move. His heart was hammering so hard he felt dizzy. This was it. This would determine whether he continued or went home to apologize to Camilla, to admit publicly that he'd been wrong about himself, that 5 years away had erased whatever talent he'd once had. He thought about Lily's surgery, about the $50,000 that could change their lives. He thought about Dr. March's faith in him, about the 2 weeks of preparation, about everything writing on a piece of paper being posted on a bulletin board. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Holy shit, the janitor made it! He's in the top 15!" The noise level exploded. Jonas stood on unsteady legs and pushed through the crowd to the Hawthorne bracket results. There, on the list of 25 advancing competitors out of 125 who'd started, he found his name, Mercer, Jonas, number 247, advanced, rank 825. He'd placed eighth out of 125 competitors from the top mathematics programs in the country. The world spun slightly. Jonas gripped the bulletin board to steady himself. He'd actually done it. Congratulations, Mr. Mercer. He turned to find Dr. March standing behind him, her expression warm. You performed exactly as I knew you would. Your solutions to problems 5, 7, and 8 were particularly elegant. The 10th problem was incomplete, yes, but your approach was correct. You identified the key insight about transforming the functional. With more time, I believe you would have finished it properly. She paused. Only 3 competitors in your bracket solved it completely. You were in excellent company for getting as far as you did. Who solved it completely? Jonas had to know. Dr. March's expression became carefully neutral. Dr. Hartwell, for one, she was competing as well as judging, a rather unusual arrangement she insisted upon. She finished with 45 minutes to spare and achieved a perfect score. Of course she had. Jonas felt a complicated mixture of emotions, respect for Camilla's undeniable brilliance, resentment at the implicit superiority, and something else he couldn't quite name. She'd completed in 2 hours 15 minutes what had taken him the full 3 hours, and she'd gotten everything right. Don't compare yourself to her, Doctor, March said softly, reading his expression. She's been preparing for months and has been teaching this material professionally for years. You held your own after 2 weeks of study and 5 years away. That's remarkable, Jonas. Semifinals are tomorrow, Jonas said. What should I expect? Harder problems. Fewer of them, usually 5 over 4 hours. More conceptual, less computational. The field will narrow from about 125 advancers across all brackets to the top 10 overall. She squeezed his shoulder. Get some rest tonight. You've already proven you belong here. Tomorrow, prove you can win. The afternoon became a blur of congratulations from other competitors, including Alex Chen, who collected his winnings and bought Jonas a coffee, and media attention. Apparently 3 news outlets were covering the janitor prodigy story, which Jonas found both flattering and mortifying. Through it all, Jonas kept catching glimpses of Camilla. She moved through the crowds like royalty, accepting congratulations on her perfect preliminary score, granting brief interviews to reporters. But occasionally Jonas would catch her looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not hatred, not quite contempt. Something more complicated. At one point, their paths crossed near the registration desk. 8 out of 125, Camilla said without preamble. Better than I expected, still not good enough. Good enough to advance. To semifinals, yes, where the real competition begins. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. Did you enjoy today, Jonas? Did you feel that old familiar rush of solving problems, of being the smartest person in the room? Or second smartest, in your case? I felt like I was doing what I was meant to do. And tomorrow, when the problems become impossibly hard, when you realize that talent without constant practice is nothing, when you crash out of semifinals and have to watch the finals from the audience, how will you feel then? Jonas met her gaze steadily. I'll feel proud that I tried. Can you say the same? When was the last time you risked failing at something that mattered? Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. For a moment, the mask slipped, and Jonas saw something underneath. Fear. Camilla Hartwell was terrified, but the mask returned immediately. I risk failure every day in my research. The difference is I have the skills to succeed. You're operating on borrowed time and faded glory. She turned to leave, then paused. Get some rest, Mr. Mercer. Tomorrow's problems will require more than luck and desperation. She disappeared into the crowd, leaving Jonas standing alone with the strangest realization. Camilla wasn't just trying to defeat him. She was trying to convince herself that she deserved her position, that her success was meaningful, that the world made sense. And Jonas's very existence threatened all of that. The drive back to the trailer park took 2 hours through evening traffic. Jonas spent it replaying the day, analyzing where he'd struggled, what he needed to review before tomorrow. The preliminary round had tested breadth of knowledge. Semifinals would test depth, the ability to see connections others missed, to synthesize ideas from different fields, to create something new under pressure. When he finally pulled up to their trailer, Maria was waiting on the steps, Lily asleep on her lap. "She insisted on waiting up for you," Maria whispered, helping Jonas carry Lily inside. "But she crashed about 20 minutes ago. She was so excited, kept telling everyone at school that her daddy was going to win a math competition." Jonas settled Lily into her bed, pulling the covers up carefully. Her cheer squad of stuffed animals was arranged around her pillow, standing guard. He kissed her forehead, breathing in the sweet smell of her strawberry shampoo. "I made it through," he whispered. "One more day, sweetheart. Just one more day." In the kitchen, Maria had left him a plate of food covered in foil. He ate mechanically, barely tasting it, his mind already moving forward to tomorrow's challenges. He needed to review topology, category theory, maybe some advanced probability. The semifinals would pull from areas that required genuine mathematical maturity, not just technical skill. His phone buzzed. "Dr. March, proud of you today. Sleep well. Tomorrow we find out if you're good or if you're great." Another message, this one from a blocked number. "You got lucky today. The problems were easier than usual. Tomorrow will expose you for what you really are. A failure who couldn't handle the pressure then and can't handle it now. Sweet dreams." CH. Jonas stared at Camilla's message for a long moment. Then he deleted it and turned off his phone. She was wrong. She had to be wrong. Because if she wasn't, if he really was just a washed-up, almost PhD playing pretend, then everything he'd sacrificed, everything he'd given up, all of it had been for nothing. He couldn't let that be true. Jonas pulled out his notebooks and studied until 2 a.m, reviewing techniques, working practice problems, preparing for whatever tomorrow would bring. When he finally collapsed into bed, his dreams were full of equations that twisted into impossible shapes, of Camilla's mocking smile, of Lily asking if they'd won yet. At 6 a.m., his alarm shattered the fragile sleep he'd managed. Jonas dragged himself out of bed, made coffee, reviewed his notes one more time. His hands were steadier today, his mind sharper despite the exhaustion. He'd proven something yesterday, to himself if no one else. Today, he would prove it again. Today, he would show them all that Jonas Mercer wasn't finished, not even close. The semifinals took place in a smaller venue, an auditorium within the convention center that felt simultaneously more intimate and more intimidating. Instead of individual workstations scattered across a massive conference room, the 125 advancing competitors sat at long tables arranged in a semicircle facing a stage where the judges presided. Giant screens on either side of the stage would display the problems. The setup felt less like an exam and more like a performance, with everyone visible to everyone else. Jonas took his assigned seat near the middle of the third row, acutely aware of the camera's position throughout the room. The Euler Challenge had always been prestigious, but this year's Janitor prodigy narrative had attracted unprecedented media attention. A live stream was running, thousands of people watching in real time. Jonas tried not to think about that, tried to focus on the mathematics ahead, but the weight of all those eyes made his skin crawl. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the semifinal round," Dr. Richardson's voice boomed through the auditorium's sound system. He stood at the center of the stage, flanked by Dr. March on his left and Camilla on his right. "Today you will face 5 problems over 4 hours. These problems are designed to test not merely your technical knowledge, but your ability to synthesize ideas from multiple fields, to see connections that are not obvious, and to create novel approaches to unfamiliar situations." He paused, letting the words sink in. Around Jonas, competitors shifted nervously. A young man to his left was breathing too fast, already on the edge of panic. A woman across the aisle sat perfectly still, eyes closed, centering herself. The top 10 competitors by cumulative score will advance to tomorrow's finals. In case of ties, we will evaluate solution elegance and originality as tiebreakers. Richardson gestured to the screens. You may begin when the first problem appears. Remember, there is no partial credit in semifinals. Solutions must be complete and rigorous. Good luck. The screens flickered to life, and Jonas felt his stomach clench. The first problem was about homotopy theory and algebraic topology. It asked competitors to prove that a certain topological space was not simply connected by constructing an explicit loop that could not be continuously deformed to a point. The setup was deceptively simple, but Jonas immediately saw the trap. The obvious approaches would fail because the space had unusual properties that violated typical intuitions. He began to work, sketching the space in his notebook, thinking about fundamental groups and covering spaces. Around him, the auditorium had fallen into concentrated silence, broken only by the scratch of pencils on paper and occasional frustrated sighs. The young man to his left had already given up on the first problem, moving to the second. The woman across the aisle was still on the first, her face creased with concentration. Jonas worked through the construction carefully, using Van Kampen's theorem to decompose the space into simpler pieces, analyzing how loops in each piece could combine. The solution required seeing that the space was actually homeomorphic to something familiar if you performed the right transformation. 38 minutes later, he had a complete proof. He glanced at the screens. The second problem was now displayed alongside the first. It was a question about functional analysis and operator theory, asking about the spectrum of a specific operator on a Hilbert space. Jonas read it twice, feeling a chill of recognition. This was very similar to the material Camilla had included in her lecture, the one he'd corrected. Was this intentional? Was she testing him specifically? He dove into the problem, using spectral theory and resolvent analysis. The operator had some unusual properties that made standard techniques fail initially, but Jonas found a way to perturb it slightly, solve the perturbed problem, and then take a limit to get back to the original. The mathematics flowed smoothly, each step building on the last. 42 minutes. 2 problems down, 3 to go. Jonas was an hour and 20 minutes into the exam. The third problem appeared on screen, and immediately the auditorium's energy shifted. Jonas heard someone nearby gasp. The woman across the aisle went pale. It was a problem about algebraic geometry and complex manifolds, requiring knowledge of sheaf cohomology and intersection theory. The question was asking competitors to compute certain characteristic classes for a manifold defined by a system of polynomial equations. This was advanced graduate-level material, the kind of thing that would appear in a doctoral dissertation. Jonas stared at the problem, his mind racing. He knew the basic theory, had studied it years ago in a topics course at Columbia, but the specific techniques were hazy. Sheaf cohomology was notoriously technical, full of abstract machinery that required constant practice to wield effectively. He started writing anyway, developing what he could remember. The key was to use a spectral sequence to relate different cohomology groups, but the details kept slipping away from him. He'd write a few lines, realize he'd made an error in applying the machinery, erase, and start over. 90 minutes in, Jonas was still stuck on the third problem. Around him, other competitors were moving forward. Camilla, sitting in the front row as both judge and competitor, had sealed 3 envelopes already. She caught Jonas's eye and smiled, mouthing something that looked like struggling. Jonas forced himself to breathe, to think clearly. He couldn't brute force this with technique he didn't have. What if he approached it differently? Instead of using the full machinery of sheaf cohomology, what if he used a more elementary geometric argument? The manifold had certain symmetries that might simplify the computation. He started fresh with this approach, and suddenly things began to click. The geometric perspective revealed structure that the algebraic approach had obscured. Within 20 minutes, he had a solution. Not the sophisticated one using advanced machinery, but a clever elementary argument that got to the same answer. It was the kind of solution that Dr. March would love. Elegant, intuitive, showing genuine understanding rather than just technical prowess. He sealed the envelope and moved to the fourth problem, now 2 hours and 10 minutes into the exam. The fourth problem was about differential geometry and geodesics on curved spaces. It asked competitors to characterize the closed geodesics on a specific Riemannian manifold and determine which were stable. Jonas felt more confident here. Differential geometry had been his focus area at Columbia. He worked through the calculus of variations, computed the second variation formula. Analyze the Morse index. The solution was long and computational, requiring careful tracking of signs and indices, but Jonas moved through it systematically. When he finished, he'd filled 8 pages with calculations. 53 minutes. 2 hours and 45 minutes elapsed. One problem remaining, just over an hour left. The 5th and final problem appeared, and Jonas immediately understood why Dr. March had warned him. This wasn't just difficult, it was vicious. The problem was about variational calculus and partial differential equations, similar to the 10th problem from preliminaries but significantly harder. It asked competitors to prove existence and uniqueness of solutions to a specific elliptic PDE, with unusual boundary conditions and nonlinear terms. The functional wasn't convex, so standard direct minimization methods would fail. The nonlinearity grew supercritically, which meant compactness arguments were subtle. The boundary conditions were non-local, making integration by parts problematic. This was a research problem, the kind of thing that might take weeks or months to solve properly. They had an hour. Jonas read the problem 3 times, his mind spinning. This had Camilla's fingerprints all over it. The specific combination of difficulties was designed to require exactly the techniques she'd mastered in her doctoral work. For someone like her, with years of experience in this specific area, it might be tractable. For Jonas, 5 years removed from active research, he had to try anyway. He started by trying to reformulate the problem, looking for hidden structure. Could the nonlinearity be handled with a fixed-point argument? No, the mapping wasn't contractive. Could he use mountain pass theory to find critical points? Maybe, but the geometry was wrong. The functional didn't have the right shape. 45 minutes left. Jonas tried building approximate solutions, hoping to use a limiting process. He set up a sequence of regularized problems that were easier to solve, proved that solutions existed for the regularized problems, then tried to pass to the limit. But the convergence was weak, and he couldn't get the strong convergence needed to handle the nonlinear terms. 30 minutes. Frustration built in his chest. He could feel the solution, could sense it was just out of reach, but every approach led to a wall. Around him, other competitors were sealing envelopes. Whether with solutions or with their best attempts, Jonas couldn't tell. Camilla had been finished for 20 minutes, sitting calmly in her seat, watching the room with an expression of serene confidence. 20 minutes. Jonas forced himself to think differently. What if he was overcomplicating this? What if there was a classical technique he'd forgotten, something elegant and simple that he was overlooking because he was too focused on modern methods? He thought about the great mathematicians of the past, about how they'd solved problems before modern functional analysis existed. They'd used symmetry, they'd used physical intuition, they'd used variational methods, not the modern Sobolev space approach, but the classical calculus of variations that Euler and Lagrange had developed. What if he transformed the PDE into an equivalent variational problem, but used the old techniques? The ones that required less abstract machinery but more direct geometric insight. Jonas's pencil began to move faster. He rewrote the problem as a question about extremizing a functional, but now he thought about it classically. The Euler-Lagrange equations, the transversality conditions, the geometric interpretation of the boundary conditions as natural boundaries for the variational problem. 10 minutes. The argument was coming together. Not complete. There were technical details he'd need to verify, but the core idea was there. He showed how the classical approach handled the boundary conditions naturally, how the nonlinearity could be managed through careful estimation in the Euler-Lagrange framework, how existence followed from compactness in the right function space. 5 minutes. Jonas was writing as fast as his hand could move, laying out the structure of the proof, indicating where detailed calculations would go, sketching the key estimates. It wasn't perfectly rigorous, a referee would ask for more details, but it demonstrated clear understanding of the problem's deep structure. Time, Richardson announced. Jonas sealed his envelope with shaking hands. His final solution was incomplete, he knew that. But it was honest, creative, showed genuine mathematical insight. Whether it would be enough? He stood with the other competitors, placing his 5 envelopes in the collection box. As he turned away, he nearly collided with Camilla. Cutting it close, weren't you? She was smiling, but there was something else in her expression now, not just superiority, but genuine curiosity. I saw you struggling with the 5th problem. It's a difficult one. You designed it. Not a question. I suggested the topic area. The actual problem was crafted by the judging committee. She tilted her head, studying him. But yes, I knew it would be challenging for someone with your gaps in recent experience. Did you finish it? Jonas asked. Something flickered across her face. Of course, it's directly related to my doctoral research. I've been working with problems like this for years. Then you should have recused yourself. It's not exactly fair to compete in a problem you essentially designed. Camilla's expression hardened. Mathematics doesn't care about fair, Mr. Mercer. It cares about correct, and you'll find that out when the results are posted. She paused, then added in a lower voice, I watched you during that last hour. I saw you throwing everything at that problem, trying technique after technique. It was almost painful to watch, like seeing someone drown slowly. I'm still here. For now. But semifinals results are final. 10 people advance, 115 go home. And I promise you, Jonas, your incomplete solution to that fifth problem is going to cost you. She leaned closer. I hope you enjoyed your brief moment of relevance. Tomorrow morning, when you don't see your name on that advancement list, remember this feeling. Remember what it's like to want something desperately and still not be good enough to achieve it. She walked away, leaving Jonas standing alone in the auditorium that was rapidly emptying. Dr. March appeared at his elbow, her expression unreadable. Walk with me, she said quietly. They left the auditorium together, moving through corridors that led to a small outdoor courtyard. The late afternoon sun was warm, a sharp contrast to the climate-controlled intensity of the competition space. Dr. March sat on a bench, gesturing for Jonas to join her. That fifth problem was brutal, she said without preamble. Camilla pushed hard for something in that area. The rest of the committee tried to moderate it, but she insisted it was appropriate for this level of competition. She paused. Between you and me, I think she specifically designed it to break you. She told me as much. And yet you attempted it anyway. You didn't give up, didn't leave it blank. Dr. March turned to look at him directly. Jonas, I reviewed your preliminary solutions last night. They were good, very good. Your approach to that topology problem showed real creativity, but today's fifth problem, Jonas's heart sank. I didn't finish it. No, you didn't, but I saw your work before solutions were collected. I happened to glance at your paper as you sealed the envelope. She smiled slightly. That classical variational approach? That was inspired. It's not the modern way to attack the problem, but it might actually work if the technical details can be verified. Might work isn't the same as works. No, it's not. Which is why I can't tell you whether you'll advance or not. The judging will be close. There are probably 15 competitors who could legitimately claim a spot in the top 10, and you're somewhere in that bubble. Jonas closed his eyes, feeling the exhaustion settle into his bones. He'd given everything he had, and it might not be enough. When will we know? Results post at 7 p.m. The committee needs time to review solutions carefully, especially for problems 4 and 5 where multiple approaches are possible. Dr. March squeezed his shoulder. Whatever happens, Jonas, you've already accomplished something remarkable. You proved you still have it. You reminded the mathematical community that talent doesn't expire just because circumstances intervene. That won't pay for Lily's surgery. No, Dr. March agreed quietly, but it's still worth something. To you, if to no one else. They sat in silence for a moment, watching other competitors drift through the courtyard in small groups, discussing the problems, sharing frustrations, and small victories. Jonas felt disconnected from them, separate. These were people for whom mathematics was still the center of their lives, who could afford to spend 4 hours on abstract problems because they had funding and time and institutional support. Jonas had none of that, just 2 weeks of desperate preparation and a lifetime of wondering what if. I should call Lily, he said finally, standing. She'll want to know how it went. Tell her you were brilliant, Dr. March said firmly. Because you were. Jonas found a quiet corner of the building and video called home. Lily answered immediately, her face filling the screen with pure joy. Daddy, how was today? Did you solve everything? I solved most of it, sweetheart. The last problem was really hard. But you tried your hardest? I did. Then that's what matters. She held up Mr. Hopper's. The cheer squad says you're doing great. We're all so proud of you. They talked for a few minutes, Lily chattering about her day, about the other kids at school who'd seen her daddy on the news, about how everyone thought he was amazing. Her absolute faith in him was simultaneously sustaining and crushing. What would he tell her when he didn't advance? How would he explain that trying your hardest sometimes wasn't enough? After they disconnected, Jonas wandered back to the main lobby. The space was filled with competitors killing time before results posted. Some were reviewing their work, others watching the live stream replay of the day's problems, still others just sitting in nervous silence. Alex Chen found him near the coffee station. Dude, that fifth problem was insane. I completely bombed it. Just wrote down the setup and some random ideas. You look like you were really going for it, though. I tried. Don't know if it was enough. At least you attempted it. Half the room gave up entirely. Alex lowered his voice. There's a betting pool on who makes top 10. You're currently at even odds, 50-50 shot. Dr. Hartwell's guaranteed, obviously. She crushed everything, but spots 6 through 15 are basically a toss-up. That's comforting, Jonas said dryly. Hey, I put money on you making it, so you better advance or I'm out $50. Alex grinned, then grew more serious. For what it's worth, man, I think what you're doing is incredible. Most people who leave mathematics never come back. The fact that you're even competing, that you held your own against people half your age who've never stopped studying, that's badass. They talked for a while longer, Alex sharing stories about Berkeley, about his own research, about the peculiar culture of academic mathematics. Jonas found himself relaxing slightly, remembering what it had been like to be part of this community, to speak the language of theorems and proofs with people who understood. At 6:45 p.m., the crowd began to drift toward the bulletin boards where results would be posted. Jonas stayed back, unable to face it directly. His phone was clutched in his hand, checking the time every 30 seconds. 6:52, 6:54, 6:58. At 7:00 p.m. Exactly. Emily and her assistants appeared with printed sheets. The crowd surged forward immediately, bodies pressing against each other in desperate need to know. Jonas heard shouting, some triumphant, others devastated. Someone near the front burst into tears. Another person let out a whoop of joy. Jonas still couldn't move. Then Alex was pushing through the crowd toward him, his face unreadable. Well? Jonas asked, his voice barely audible. Alex broke into a huge grin. You magnificent bastard! You made it! Number 10. You're in by a single point. The world tilted slightly. Jonas grabbed Alex's shoulder to steady himself. You're serious? Dead serious. Come see for yourself. They pushed through the crowd to the board. There, at the bottom of the advancement list, Jonas found his name. 10. Mercer. Jonas, number 247. Advanced to finals. Cumulative score 427,500. Above him, 9 other names. In the number 1 spot, unsurprisingly, 1. Hartwell, Camilla. Amdar 089. Advanced to finals. Cumulative score 498,500. She'd gotten nearly everything perfect, and Jonas had barely scraped into the top 10. But he was in. Against all odds, against all reasonable expectations, he was in the finals. Congratulations, Mr. Mercer. Jonas turned to find Camilla standing behind him. Her expression was complicated. Frustration, respect, something else he couldn't quite identify. Thank you, he managed. Don't thank me. That was your work, not my generosity. She crossed her arms. I read your solution to the 5th problem. That classical variational approach was unexpected, imperfect, incomplete, but the core insight was sound. The judges gave you partial credit for originality. I thought there was no partial credit in semifinals. There isn't, usually, but your approach was sufficiently novel that we debated it for 30 minutes. Dr. March argued that demonstrating a new path to the solution was worth recognizing, even if you didn't complete the journey. She won the argument. Camilla's jaw tightened. So you have her to thank for your advancement, not your own abilities. I'll be sure to thank her. Do that, and then prepare yourself for tomorrow. Camilla stepped closer, her voice dropping to something intimate and dangerous. The finals are different, Jonas. 10 competitors, one problem, 3 hours. That's it. One problem designed by the entire judging committee to test every aspect of mathematical maturity. There's no strategy, no way to skip hard parts and make up points elsewhere. You either solve it completely or you fail. And you've already seen the problem. I've participated in designing it, yes, as has Dr. March, Dr. Richardson, and the other judges. We crafted something that will identify the single best mathematical mind in this competition. Her smile was sharp. I made sure it would be something that requires not just creativity or technique, but years of sustained practice. The kind of problem that favors people who never stopped working, who never quit, who never chose mediocrity over excellence. You mean people like you. Exactly like me. She leaned in even closer, and Jonas could smell her perfume, something cold and expensive. You've had a remarkable run, Jonas. You should be proud. You proved you still have talent, that you're not completely washed up. But tomorrow? Tomorrow you're going to face something that will remind you why you left academia in the first place. Because when it really mattered, when you had to choose between your career and your personal life, you chose to quit. And quitters don't win championships. I chose my daughter over a thesis. That's not quitting, that's being a father. For just a moment, something flickered in Camilla's eyes. Pain, recognition, vulnerability. Then the mask slammed back into place. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., main auditorium. I'd tell you to get some rest, but we both know you'll be up all night trying to prepare for a problem you can't possibly anticipate. I almost feel sorry for you. She walked away, leaving Jonas standing in front of the results board, surrounded by celebrating competitors and devastated ones. Dr. March found him there 10 minutes later. Jonas, a word? They moved to a quiet conference room. Dr. March closed the door and turned to face him with an expression of profound seriousness. Tomorrow's finals problem is unlike anything you've faced, she began. Camilla fought hard to make it as brutal as possible. She wanted something from her doctoral dissertation, a problem she spent 3 years solving. We managed to moderate it somewhat, but it's still at the boundary of what we can reasonably expect someone to solve in 3 hours. What's the topic? I can't tell you that. It would be unethical. Dr. March paused. But I can tell you this. The problem will require synthesis of multiple fields: analysis, topology, algebra, geometry. It will require seeing connections that aren't obvious. And most importantly, it will require a certain kind of courage, the willingness to try an approach that seems too simple, too classical, too obvious to work. Like the variational approach on today's fifth problem. Exactly like that. Jonas, I pushed hard to give you credit for that solution because I saw something in it that reminded me of the mathematician you used to be. You didn't have the technical machinery to solve it the modern way, so you went back to first principles. You thought like Euler, like Lagrange, like the giants who built this field before we had all our fancy tools. She gripped his shoulders. That's your strength, not technique. You've been away too long for that. Your strength is seeing the essential structure of a problem, the deep truth that underlies all the technical complexity. Will that be enough tomorrow? I don't know, Dr. March said honestly. Camilla has technique and experience. You have insight and creativity. Tomorrow will determine which matters more. They talked for another hour, Dr. March sharing what she could about the philosophy behind the finals problem without revealing specifics, helping Jonas understand the mindset he'd need. When they finally parted, Jonas felt simultaneously more prepared and more terrified. The drive home was long and dark. Jonas's mind raced through everything he'd learned, every technique he'd reviewed, every insight he'd had over the past 2 weeks. Tomorrow would be the culmination of all of it. One problem, 3 hours, his entire future hanging in the balance. When he arrived at the trailer, Lily was already asleep. Maria left quietly, squeezing Jonas's hand in silent support. He checked on his daughter, sleeping peacefully, her cheer squad arranged protectively around her, and then moved to the kitchen table. His phone buzzed with messages. Congratulations from Dr. March, encouragement from Alex Chen, a longer message from Maria about how proud she was, how Lily had spent the evening telling everyone about her brilliant father. And one more message from Camilla. Third time's the charm, they say. Except you've already had your 2 chances, preliminaries and semifinals. Tomorrow, you're out of luck, out of time, and out of your depth. Sleep well, Jonas. It's the last peaceful night you'll have before everyone sees what I've known all along. You're a fraud. Jonas stared at the message for a long time. Then he set his phone aside and pulled out his notebooks. He studied until 3 in the morning, working through classical papers, reviewing fundamental theorems, preparing his mind for whatever was coming. When exhaustion finally forced him to stop, he sat in the darkness of the kitchen, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Columbia and the brilliant future he'd imagined. Sarah's death and the devastating grief. Lily's diagnosis and the impossible choice. 5 years of mopping floors and wondering if he'd made the right decision. Tomorrow would answer that question. Tomorrow would prove whether Jonas Mercer was who he thought he was, or just a man clinging to a past that no longer belonged to him. Tomorrow would determine everything. And as the first light of dawn crept through the kitchen window, Jonas realized something fundamental. He wasn't afraid anymore. Nervous, yes. Uncertain, absolutely, but not afraid. Because win or lose, he'd already proven something to himself. He'd proven he could still do mathematics at the highest level. He'd proven that 5 years away hadn't erased who he was fundamentally. He'd proven that brilliance didn't have an expiration date. Now he just had to prove it one more time, when it mattered most. Jonas arrived at the convention center at 7:30 in the morning, 90 minutes before the finals would begin. The main auditorium was already buzzing with activity. Camera crews setting up equipment, journalists conducting pre-competition interviews, early arriving spectators claiming seats. This wasn't just a mathematics competition anymore. It had become an event, a story, a spectacle that had captured public imagination in a way the Euler Challenge never had before. The janitor versus the professor, the dropout versus the elite, the underdog story that people couldn't stop talking about. Jonas made his way through the lobby, ignoring the cameras that swiveled toward him, the reporters who called his name. He found the competitors' preparation room, a quiet space set aside for the 10 finalists, and slipped inside. 6 people were already there. Jonas recognized most of them from the previous rounds. Alex Chen sat in a corner, headphones on, eyes closed, breathing deeply. A young woman named Sarah Kim from MIT was reviewing notes, her hands shaking slightly. 2 men Jonas didn't know were engaged in quiet conversation, their body language suggesting they were trying to calm each other's nerves. And in the far corner, perfectly composed, sat Camilla Hartwell. She looked up as Jonas entered, her expression unreadable. She was dressed impeccably. A dark blazer over a silk blouse, her hair pulled back in that severe bun that made her look simultaneously intimidating and untouchable. She looked like she'd slept perfectly, like she hadn't spent the night agonizing over what was coming. "Mr. Mercer," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet room. "I'm surprised you're here so early. Most people in your position would be savoring their last hour of peace." "I could say the same about you." "I'm not nervous." She closed her notebook. Jonas glimpsed pages of dense equations, and stood, walking over to him. "I've been preparing for this moment for 3 years. I know exactly what's coming, exactly what's required. This is just another day's work for me." "Then why are you here 90 minutes early?" Something flickered across her face. "Because I don't leave things to chance. Because I've worked too hard to risk any detail being wrong." She paused, studying him. "You look exhausted. Did you sleep at all?" "A few hours." "Not enough. You'll need mental stamina today, Jonas. The problem we've designed isn't something you can solve through pure inspiration. It requires sustained concentration over the full 3 hours. If your mind is already tired..." "I'll be fine." Camilla smiled slightly. "Will you? Or are you running on adrenaline and desperation? I've seen it before, competitors who make it to finals on talent and luck, then crash when faced with something that requires genuine depth." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "You know what the difference is between us? I've been doing this professionally for a decade. I teach this material. I live and breathe it every single day. You've had 2 weeks. Maybe that's my advantage." Jonas met her gaze steadily. "I don't have years of orthodoxy weighing me down. I can see problems fresh without assuming I know the only way to solve them. We'll see if your fresh perspective survives the next 3 hours." She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. When you fail today, and you will fail. I want you to remember something. This wasn't personal. This was about maintaining standards, about protecting the integrity of mathematics from people who think enthusiasm can substitute for expertise. You're a cautionary tale, Jonas, a reminder of why we can't let anyone with a clever insight think they can compete at this level. She walked away before he could respond, leaving Jonas standing alone with his racing thoughts and pounding heart. Other finalists trickled in over the next hour. By 8:45, all 10 were present. The energy in the room was electric with tension. Some competitors were reviewing notes frantically. Others sat in meditation or prayer. Alex caught Jonas's eye and gave him a thumbs up, trying to project confidence that his pale face contradicted. At 8:55, Emily appeared in the doorway. Finalists, please follow me to the auditorium. It's time. They filed out in single file, moving through corridors that seemed too bright, too loud. Jonas could hear the auditorium before they reached it, the murmur of hundreds of spectators, the camera shutters clicking, the ambient noise of an event that had grown far beyond its original scope. The doors opened and Jonas felt his breath catch. The auditorium was packed, every seat filled, people standing in the aisles, cameras positioned at strategic angles. On the stage, 10 individual workstations had been set up, desks with blank paper, pencils, and a small placard with each competitor's name. Behind the workstations, 3 enormous screens displayed the Euler Challenge logo. The 10 finalists walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. Jonas felt disconnected from his body, like he was watching himself from a distance. He found his station, number 7, near the middle, and sat down. To his left, Sarah Kim looked like she might be sick. To his right, a confident-looking man from Cambridge was already testing his pencils, getting ready. Camilla sat at Station 1, the position of honor as the top seed. She looked completely relaxed, almost bored, as if this was all just a formality. Dr. Richardson stepped to a podium at stage center. The crowd noise died immediately. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the finals of the Euler Mathematical Challenge. His voice boomed through the auditorium's sound system. These 10 competitors represent the finest mathematical minds we've seen in years. Over the past 2 days, they have solved problems that would challenge professional researchers. Today, they face their ultimate test. He paused for effect, and Jonas felt his heart hammering against his ribs. The finals consist of a single problem, displayed simultaneously to all competitors. 3 hours to solve it. The competitor who produces the most complete, rigorous, and elegant solution will be named Euler Challenge Champion and will receive a $50,000 fellowship plus a research position at the institution of their choice. The crowd murmured appreciatively. $50,000. Lily's surgery, their future. The problem you will see today was crafted by our entire judging committee over the past 3 months. It represents the culmination of what we believe mathematical excellence should look like. Synthesis of multiple fields, creative insight, and rigorous proof. Dr. Richardson gestured to the judging table where Dr. March and 2 other judges sat alongside an empty chair. Dr. Hartwell will join us at the judges' table once competition begins, as she is also competing. So Camilla would be both competitor and judge. Jonas wondered how that had been allowed, what arguments she'd made to secure that privilege. Competitors, you may begin when the problem appears on screen. Remember, we are evaluating not just correctness, but elegance and clarity of presentation. Show your work completely. Good luck. Richardson stepped back. The lights dimmed slightly. The 3 enormous screens flickered to life. And there, in stark black text against white background, appeared the problem that would determine everything. Jonas read it once, then again, then a 3rd time, his stomach sinking with each pass. The problem was a monster. It asked competitors to prove existence and uniqueness of solutions to a specific system of coupled partial differential equations arising in differential geometry. The system described the evolution of geometric flows on manifolds with boundary, where the boundary conditions were non-local and time-dependent. The equations involved 4th-order terms, nonlinear coupling between different components, and degeneracies that made standard PDE theory inapplicable. To solve it completely would require techniques from functional analysis, geometric analysis, evolution equations, and abstract algebra. It would require seeing how all these pieces fit together, how to use symmetries to reduce complexity, how to construct approximate solutions, and prove they converged. It was exactly the kind of problem that would have appeared in Camilla's doctoral dissertation. Jonas looked over at her. She'd already started writing, her pencil moving confidently across the paper. She knew this problem, maybe not this exact formulation, but certainly the techniques needed to solve it. She'd been preparing for this specific type of problem for years. Around him, other competitors were beginning to work, some confidently, others with visible panic. Sarah Kim was staring at the problem like it was written in a foreign language. Alex had started writing but kept stopping, erasing, starting over. Jonas forced himself to breathe, to think clearly. Don't panic. Break it down. What do you know? He started by writing out the full system of equations, making sure he understood the setup completely. The equations described how certain geometric quantities evolved over time, subject to boundary conditions that coupled the interior behavior to the boundary behavior in a complicated way. The standard approach would be to use parabolic PDE theory, treating this as an evolution equation and proving existence of solutions for short times, then trying to extend to longer times. But the fourth-order terms meant it wasn't strictly parabolic, and the degeneracies made regularity estimates problematic. Jonas spent 30 minutes just analyzing the structure of the problem, identifying where the difficulties lay. The non-local boundary conditions were the key obstacle. They prevented using standard energy estimates because you couldn't integrate by parts cleanly. He glanced at the clock. 35 minutes elapsed. Camilla had already filled several pages, her solution developing systematically. The Cambridge competitor was making steady progress. Sarah Kim had given up and was just staring at her blank paper, tears sliding down her face. Jonas looked back at the problem. Think, what would the classical mathematicians have done? Before all the modern functional analysis machinery, how would someone like Poincaré or Hilbert have approached this? They would have looked for symmetries. They would have tried to find conserved quantities, things that didn't change as the system evolved. Those could give you control over the solution, could tell you it couldn't blow up or develop singularities. Jonas started hunting for symmetries in the equations. The manifold had a specific geometric structure. Was there a group action that left the equations invariant? He worked through the algebra, testing different possibilities. 50 minutes in, he found it. The manifold had a hidden rotational symmetry that wasn't obvious from the original formulation. If you worked in coordinates adapted to this symmetry, the equations simplified dramatically. The coupling between components reduced, the non-local boundary conditions became local. Jonas's pencil began to move faster, excitement building. This was it. This was the insight that would unlock the problem. He rewrote the equations in the symmetric coordinates, and suddenly everything became clearer. The fourth-order terms decoupled, the degeneracies disappeared. It was still difficult, but now it was tractable. He worked for another hour, developing the solution systematically, proving that solutions existed for the symmetry-reduced problem, showing they were unique, demonstrating that the symmetry assumption didn't lose generality. Any solution to the original problem had to respect the symmetry by uniqueness of solutions. 2 hours elapsed. Jonas was deep in the proof, filling page after page with calculations. Around him, the auditorium had fallen into absolute silence. Even the camera shutters had stopped clicking, as if everyone was holding their breath. He proved existence using a fixed-point theorem, carefully constructing a mapping whose fixed points corresponded to solutions. He proved uniqueness using an energy argument, showing that two solutions would have to agree. He verified all the regularity estimates needed to make the arguments rigorous. 2 hours and 30 minutes. The proof was coming together, but Jonas still needed to address the boundary conditions explicitly. The symmetry reduction had simplified them, but he still needed to prove they were satisfied. He worked through the boundary analysis, using trace theorems and careful estimation. The non-local nature of the conditions required a subtle argument involving Fourier analysis, decomposing the boundary behavior into modes and showing each mode was controlled. 2 hours and 45 minutes. Jonas was writing as fast as he could, racing against the clock. The argument was complete in his head, but getting it down on paper with all the necessary details was taking longer than he'd anticipated. He abbreviated some steps, indicated where detailed calculations would go, focused on making the logical structure clear. Around him, several competitors had given up. Sarah Kim had left the stage entirely, unable to continue. Two others sat with their heads in their hands, defeated. Alex was still working but looked frustrated, stuck on some aspect of the problem. Only 3 people seemed to be making real progress: Camilla, the Cambridge competitor, and Jonas himself. 2 hours and 55 minutes. Jonas wrote the final line of his proof, showing that all the pieces fit together to establish existence and uniqueness of solutions. He'd done it. The solution was complete, rigorous, showing every major step. Not every tiny detail was spelled out, but the structure was there, solid and clear. He set down his pencil and looked at what he'd created. 12 pages of dense mathematics, each page building on the last, the whole thing forming a coherent argument from first principles to final conclusion. It was good, maybe the best mathematics he'd ever done. But was it enough? Time, Dr. Richardson announced. The word echoed through the auditorium. Jonas sealed his solution in the envelope provided, his hands shaking slightly. Around him, other competitors were doing the same, some looking relieved, others devastated. Camilla sealed her envelope calmly, then stood and walked to the judging table, taking her seat. She looked completely confident, unworried. She'd finished with 20 minutes to spare, Jonas had noticed. Whatever she'd written, she believed it was complete. Competitors, please bring your solutions forward, Richardson instructed. They filed to the front of the stage, placing their sealed envelopes in a wooden box. As Jonas dropped his in, he caught Dr. March's eye. She gave him a small nod, but her expression was unreadable. The judging committee will now review all solutions, Richardson continued. This process typically takes 3 to 4 hours. Results will be announced this evening at 6 p.m. here in this auditorium. Competitors and guests are welcome to remain in the facility or leave and return. Thank you all for your extraordinary efforts today. The tension broke. Spectators began talking, moving, heading for exits. Competitors left the stage in small groups, some hugging each other, others walking alone with their thoughts. Jonas found a quiet corner in the lobby and collapsed onto a bench. His mind felt simultaneously electric and exhausted, still running through the proof, checking steps, wondering if he'd made any errors. Alex found him there 20 minutes later. Dude, that was insane. Did you finish? I think so. You? Not even close. I got stuck on the boundary conditions and couldn't figure out how to handle the coupling. I just wrote down what I could and hoped for partial credit. Alex sat down heavily beside him. Camilla looked like she finished easy. And that Cambridge guy, James something, he was writing confidently the whole time. Dr. March always said mathematics isn't a race. Yeah, but it kind of is when there's a time limit. Alex ran his hands through his hair. Man, I need food. And probably a stiff drink. Want to grab lunch while we wait for the verdict? Jonas declined, too nervous to eat. He spent the afternoon in the preparation room alone with his thoughts and his phone. He texted Lily, just finished, waiting for results, and got back an immediate response. A dozen heart emojis and a photo of her cheer squad arranged in a victory formation. Maria texted, "Whatever happens, you did something incredible. Lily talks about you like you're a superhero, Doctor." March sent a single message. "Trust your work. You solved it your way, with insight and creativity. That counts for something." Nothing from Camilla. Jonas hadn't expected anything. At 4 p.m., Jonas returned to the auditorium. It was filling up again, spectators and media returning for the announcement. The tension in the air was palpable. This was it, the moment that would determine everything. The 10 finalists were directed to a reserved section near the front. Jonas sat between Alex and a quiet competitor from Stanford who'd barely spoken all week. On stage, the judging table was set up with microphones and a podium. The 3 enormous screens displayed the Euler Challenge logo, waiting. At 5:45, the judges filed onto stage. Dr. Richardson, Dr. March, Camilla, and 2 other judges Jonas didn't know well. They took their seats, arranging papers and conferring in low voices. Camilla looked satisfied, almost smug. Dr. March's expression was carefully neutral. At 6 p.m. exactly, Dr. Richardson stood and approached the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. The judging committee has completed our review of all 10 solutions submitted today. I want to begin by acknowledging the extraordinary quality of work we witnessed. The problem you saw today was intentionally difficult, designed to push even the best mathematical minds to their limits. Several competitors produced work that would be worthy of publication in research journals. The crowd was absolutely silent, hanging on every word. However, we can only name one champion. Before I announce the results, I want to invite Dr. March to say a few words about what we were evaluating. Dr. March stood, moving to the podium with her characteristic grace. Thank you, James. Today's problem required synthesis of techniques from multiple fields: differential geometry, functional analysis, PDE theory. We were looking for solutions that not only reached the correct answer, but demonstrated deep understanding of why the mathematics works the way it does. She paused, and Jonas felt his heart hammering. We received 3 substantially complete solutions. These 3 competitors showed genuine mathematical maturity, creative insight, and rigorous reasoning. I want to acknowledge them specifically. She looked down at her notes. Dr. Camilla Hartwell from Hawthorne Ridge University produced a masterful solution using modern functional analysis techniques. Her work was complete, rigorous, and exemplary. Applause rippled through the auditorium. Camilla nodded graciously. James Wellington from Cambridge University provided an equally strong solution using geometric analysis methods. His approach was sophisticated and carefully executed. More applause. James stood briefly to acknowledge it. And finally, Jonas Mercer produced a solution that I can only describe as remarkable. Dr. March's voice took on a different quality, something like wonder. Mr. Mercer identified a hidden symmetry in the problem that no one else saw. This symmetry simplified the equations dramatically and revealed structure that the original formulation obscured. His solution was creative, elegant, and deeply insightful. The applause was thunderous. Jonas sat frozen, unable to process what he was hearing. However, Dr. March continued, and the crowd silenced immediately. There were differences in completeness and rigor. Dr. Hartwell's solution spelled out every technical detail explicitly. Mr. Wellington's solution was similarly thorough. Mr. Mercer's solution, while brilliant in its core insight, left some technical details sketched rather than fully proven. This presented the committee with a difficult choice. Jonas's stomach dropped. He'd been so focused on the main ideas that he'd rushed some of the technical verification. Had that cost him everything? The committee debated for over 2 hours, Dr. March said. We discussed what mathematical excellence means, what we should prioritize in evaluating solutions. Do we value technical completeness over creative insight? Do we reward orthodox approaches or innovative ones? She paused. In the end, we came to a decision. But before I announce it, I want to ask Dr. Hartwell to share her perspective as both competitor and judge. Camilla stood and approached the podium. She looked uncomfortable for the first time all week, something in her posture suggesting internal conflict. Thank you, Dr. March. Her voice was steady but lacking its usual confidence. I want to address the elephant in the room. I competed today while also serving as a judge. Some have questioned whether that was appropriate. I argued to the committee that I could be objective, that my professional standing meant I could maintain proper boundaries. She paused, and Jonas saw her hands tighten on the podium. I was wrong. I designed this competition to prove a point, to prove that mathematical excellence requires sustained professional dedication, that talent alone isn't enough, that people who leave academia forfeit their right to compete at this level. I chose today's problem specifically to favor approaches I was familiar with, techniques I'd mastered, methods that would be difficult for someone with gaps in their training. The auditorium was dead silent now. And Mr. Mercer solved it anyway, not using the methods I expected, but using an insight I completely missed. A symmetry that I, with all my years of experience and expertise, failed to see. Her voice cracked slightly. His solution is incomplete in some technical details, yes, but it's also genuinely creative in a way mine isn't. He found a new path to the answer, one that's actually more elegant than the standard approach. She turned to look directly at Jonas. I owe you an apology, Mr. Mercer. Not just for today, but for everything. For mocking you in my lecture hall, for trying to humiliate you publicly, for designing this competition to break you. You proved that mathematical brilliance doesn't expire just because life gets in the way. You proved that insight and creativity matter as much as technical training. You proved me wrong in every way that matters." Tears were streaming down her face now, and Jonas felt his own eyes burning. "I told you once that mathematics requires serious pedigree. I was an arrogant fool. Mathematics requires curiosity, creativity, and courage, all things you've shown in abundance. I don't know if I can earn your forgiveness, but I want you to know you belong in this world. You always have." She stepped back from the podium, wiping her eyes. Dr. March squeezed her shoulder as she returned to her seat. Dr. Richardson stood again. "Thank you, Dr. Hartwell, for that honesty. Now, for the results. In third place, with an excellent geometric solution, James Wellington from Cambridge University." Applause. James stood and waved. In second place, with a masterful technical solution demonstrating complete command of modern functional analysis, Dr. Camilla Hartwell. More applause, though Camilla barely reacted, staring at the table in front of her. Jonas couldn't breathe. This meant... And in first place, for a solution that demonstrated extraordinary creative insight and revealed new mathematical structure, the Euler Challenge champion is Jonas Mercer. The auditorium exploded. People were standing, cheering, applauding. Cameras flashed. Someone was shouting his name. Jonas sat frozen, unable to move, unable to process that this was real. Alex grabbed him, pulling him to his feet. "You did it! You incredible bastard! You actually did it!" Jonas stumbled toward the stage in a daze. Dr. Richardson was holding an oversized check, $50,000. Doctor. March was beaming, tears in her eyes. And Camilla was standing, applauding with everyone else, her face a complicated mixture of emotions. Richardson handed Jonas the microphone. "Would you like to say anything?" Jonas looked out at the crowd, at all those faces. He thought about Lily at home watching on live stream, about the 5 years of mopping floors and wondering if he'd made the right choice, about Sarah and how she'd believed in him even when he'd stopped believing in himself. "I want to thank Dr. March for never giving up on me," he said, his voice shaking. "And I want to thank my daughter Lily, who reminded me that trying your hardest is what matters, not whether you're the smartest person in the room." He paused. Mathematics is beautiful because it's true for everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances. You don't need permission to love it, to pursue it, to contribute to it. You just need curiosity and courage. He looked at Camilla. "And I want to thank Dr. Hartwell. What she just said took more courage than solving any equation. She challenged me to prove I still belonged in this world, and that challenge made me better than I thought I could be." The applause was deafening. As Jonas left the stage, clutching his check and his championship certificate, Camilla intercepted him. "I meant every word I said up there," she told him quietly. "I was terrified of you, Jonas. Terrified that if someone like you, someone who'd left and come back, could compete with me, it would mean my entire career, everything I'd sacrificed for mathematics, wasn't as special as I'd told myself it was. Your work is brilliant, Camilla. You got second place in the most prestigious mathematics competition in the country. I got second place to someone working a night shift and studying between cleaning bathrooms." She smiled, but there was no bitterness in it now. "That's actually incredible. It means mathematics is bigger than I'd let myself believe. More democratic, more open. I'd spent so long building walls around it, protecting it like some exclusive club." She extended her hand. "Can we start over? As colleagues?" Jonas took her hand. "I'd like that." "Good, because I'm going to make this right. There's a fellowship at Hawthorne Ridge, fully funded, complete flexibility. It's yours if you want it. You can finish your PhD, publish your research, and we'll be honored to have you." Behind them, media was gathering, wanting interviews, questions. But Jonas was thinking about Lily, about telling her they'd won, about the surgery that would save her life, about the future that had suddenly opened up before them. He'd come to this competition desperate and doubting. He was leaving it transformed. The janitor had become the champion, and the world of mathematics would never quite be the same. The drive home from Boston took on a dreamlike quality, as if Jonas was moving through a world that had fundamentally shifted while he wasn't looking. The oversized check sat in the passenger seat, $50,000 made tangible, made real. His phone buzzed continuously with messages, calls, notifications that he'd become some kind of overnight sensation. The video of Camilla's emotional apology had already gone viral, shared millions of times with captions like, "Professor admits she was wrong," and "Humility in academia." But Jonas barely registered any of it. His mind kept circling back to a single thought. Lily would be okay. After years of worry, of counting pennies and making impossible choices, of lying awake wondering how he'd afford the surgery that would save his daughter's life, it was over. They'd won. He pulled into the trailer park just after midnight. The lights were on in their trailer, and through the window he could see movement. Maria had stayed late, bless her, keeping Lily awake to see her father return triumphant. Jonas grabbed the check and stepped out of the car. Before he could reach the door, it burst open and Lily flew out in her pajamas, her stuffed rabbit Mr. Hoppers clutched in one hand. "Daddy! Daddy! You won! You actually won!" She crashed into him with the full force of 8-year-old enthusiasm, and Jonas caught her, lifting her up despite the exhaustion in his bones. "We won, sweetheart. We won everything." Lily pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining with tears and joy. "Maria let me watch on her tablet. I saw you go up on stage. I saw that lady say she was sorry. I saw them give you the big check." She touched his face gently, as if confirming he was real. "You looked so happy, Daddy." "I was. I am." Jonas carried her inside, where Maria waited with her own tears streaming down her weathered face. "Oh, Jonas," Maria whispered, pulling him into a hug once he'd set Lily down. I always knew you were special. That little girl's been telling everyone who'd listened that her daddy was going to win, and she was right." They sat together in the tiny kitchen, the same table where Jonas had studied until dawn, the same chairs that had witnessed 5 years of struggle and sacrifice. Maria made coffee despite the late hour, and Lily insisted on arranging her entire cheer squad around the championship certificate that Jonas had carefully placed on the table. "Tell me everything," Lily demanded, settling into Jonas's lap. "Tell me about the problem. Was it super hard? Did that mean lady try to make you lose?" Jonas found himself laughing, the tension of the past week finally releasing. "It was the hardest problem I've ever solved. And yes, Dr. Hartwell made it very difficult. But you know what I realized, Lily? Sometimes the hardest problems teach us the most important things." "Like what?" "Like how people can change. Like how being wrong doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you're brave enough to admit you made a mistake and try to do better." He smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "Dr. Hartwell apologized in front of hundreds of people. That took more courage than solving any equation." Lily considered this seriously. "Is she still mean?" "I don't think she was ever really mean. I think she was scared, and fear made her act in ways she's not proud of." Jonas looked at the certificate, at his name inscribed in elegant calligraphy. Sometimes the smartest people are the most scared because they think their intelligence is all they have. They forget about kindness and growth and the courage to be wrong. Maria refilled his coffee, her eyes still misty. "What happens now? With the money? With your career?" "First thing tomorrow, I'm calling the hospital to schedule Lily's surgery. No more waiting, no more worrying about payment plans. It's happening." Jonas felt the weight of years lifting from his shoulders. "Then I need to figure out what comes next. Dr. March wants me to come back to Columbia to finish my PhD. Camilla offered me a fellowship at Hawthorne Ridge, MIT, Princeton, Stanford. They've all reached out." "That's wonderful." Maria clasped her hands together. "You have choices again." "We have choices," Jonas corrected, squeezing Lily. "Every decision I make, we make together. That's not changing." Lily yawned hugely, her excitement finally giving way to exhaustion. Jonas carried her to bed, tucking her in among her cheer squad of stuffed animals. As he turned to leave, she caught his hand. "Daddy, I'm not scared about the surgery anymore." "No?" "No. Because if you can win against all those smart people, if you can solve impossible math problems, then the doctors can definitely fix my heart." She smiled sleepily. "We're both brave now." Jonas kissed her forehead, his throat tight with emotion. "We've always been brave, sweetheart. We just didn't always know it." He returned to the kitchen to find Maria preparing to leave. She hugged him tightly at the door. "Sarah would be so proud of you, Jonas. She always said you could do anything you set your mind to." After Maria left, Jonas sat alone in the quiet trailer, the championship certificate before him, and allowed himself to fully feel everything he'd been holding back. The grief for Sarah, who should have been here to see this, the relief that Lily would be okay, the pride in what he'd accomplished, the exhaustion of pushing himself further than he'd thought possible, the strange, unexpected hope for the future. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. March. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow the real work begins, but tonight, celebrate. You've earned it." Another text, this one from Camilla. "I know it's late, but I couldn't sleep without saying this properly. What you did today changed me. Changed how I see mathematics, teaching, everything. Thank you for that gift. I hope we can talk soon about the fellowship. No pressure, just possibilities." Jonas responded to both with simple thank yous, then turned off his phone. Tomorrow would bring decisions and complications. Tonight was for savoring victory, for breathing freely, for remembering what it felt like to succeed at something that mattered. He fell asleep on the couch, still dressed, the championship certificate on the table where he could see it, proof that impossible things could happen if you were brave enough to try. The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind that Jonas struggled to process. The morning after his victory, he called Boston Children's Hospital and scheduled Lily's surgery for 6 weeks out. Enough time for the medical team to prepare, but no more waiting, no more delays. The relief in the cardiac surgeon's voice when Jonas explained he could pay in full was palpable. They'd been watching Lily's case with concern, knowing the surgery was urgent but unable to push without confirmation of funding. The media attention proved both blessing and curse. Jonas's story resonated with people who'd felt overlooked, underestimated, pushed aside by circumstances beyond their control. He received thousands of emails from single parents, from people who'd left careers for family, from janitors and drivers and retail workers who still nurtured dreams of something more. Their stories broke his heart and rebuilt it simultaneously. So many brilliant people whose potential had been buried under economic necessity. But the attention also brought scrutiny. Academic forums debated whether Jonas had truly earned his victory, whether the judging had been fair, whether emotional narratives had influenced mathematical evaluation. Some argued that Camilla's complete solution should have won, that rewarding incomplete work set a dangerous precedent. Others praised the judges for valuing insight over rote technique. Dr. March addressed the controversy in an editorial published in the American Mathematical Society Journal. Jonas read it on his phone while sitting in the hospital waiting room during one of Lily's pre-surgical checkups. "Mathematics has always progressed through insight, not merely computation," Dr. March had written. Euler, Ramanujan, Grothendieck, history's greatest mathematicians saw structure that others missed, found elegant paths that made complex problems simple. Jonas Mercer's solution embodied this tradition. To privilege technical completeness over creative vision is to misunderstand what mathematics is fundamentally about, the search for truth through clarity of thought. Mr. Mercer showed us something true about the problem that no one else saw. That is excellence. The editorial sparked further debate, but Jonas tried to ignore it. He had more immediate concerns: Lily's health, the future he needed to build, the promises he'd made to himself and his daughter. Camilla reached out a week after the competition with a formal offer. The Mercer Fellowship, she called it, with characteristic directness. Full funding for Jonas to complete his PhD, complete flexibility to work at his own pace, and a guaranteed teaching position afterward if he wanted it. She'd gotten her dean to approve it within days, using a combination of her personal reputation and the positive publicity Jonas's story had brought Hawthorne Ridge. "I want to do this right," she told Jonas over coffee at a diner near campus. It was their first private conversation since the competition, and Camilla looked different somehow, less armored, more human. "Not as penance, though there's some of that, but because you made me realize how many brilliant people we're losing because they can't afford to stay in academia. The fellowship isn't just for you, it's the start of a program. We're going to fund 5 more positions like it next year, targeting people who've had to leave for financial or family reasons." Jonas stirred his coffee, thinking, "Why are you doing this, Camilla? Really?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Because I've spent 10 years building walls around mathematics, protecting it like some exclusive club. I told myself I was maintaining standards, but really I was just afraid. Afraid that if someone without the right pedigree could compete with me, it would mean all my sacrifices, the relationships I didn't have, the life I didn't live, the parts of myself I gave up for my career, that all of it was for nothing. That's not nothing. Your work is brilliant. My work is competent, Camilla corrected gently. Technically proficient, rigorous, publishable. But is it transformative? Does it see things no one else sees? She smiled sadly. You showed me the difference between being good at mathematics and being a mathematician. I'm very good at mathematics. But you're a mathematician. You think like Euler thought, like Ramanujan thought, and I spent weeks trying to crush that because it threatened me. You apologized. Publicly, in the most difficult way possible. That counts for something. Does it? Does saying sorry undo the damage? Camilla looked at him intently. I humiliated you in front of your students, Jonas. I designed a competition to break you. I weaponized my position to make you feel small. An apology doesn't erase that. No, but it starts the healing, for both of us. Jonas paused. I spent 5 years feeling like I'd failed, like leaving Columbia made me a failure. You weren't entirely wrong about me, Camilla. I was bitter about what I'd given up. I was angry at the world for making me choose between my career and my daughter. Your contempt just vocalized what I'd been telling myself. So we both needed this wake-up call. Maybe we did, Jonas smiled. Tell me about the teaching position. What would that look like? They talked for 2 hours, sketching out possibilities. Jonas wouldn't start immediately. He needed to focus on Lily's surgery and recovery first. But in the fall, he could begin part-time, teaching while completing his dissertation research. Camilla had already spoken to the department about creating courses specifically for non-traditional students, for people who'd taken breaks from mathematics and wanted to return. We're calling it Second Chances in STEM, Camilla explained. Evening classes, online options, childcare support, emergency funding for people dealing with crises. Everything we should have been doing all along. She hesitated. I'd like you to help design the curriculum. You understand what these students need in a way I never could. Because I am these students. Exactly. Camilla paid for their coffee, insisting despite Jonas's protests. As they walked to the parking lot, she said, There's something else. The university wants to name the new mathematics building after you. The Mercer Center for Mathematical Excellence. They're calling you an inspiration, a symbol of accessible education. Jonas stopped walking. They want to name a building after the janitor who cleaned it? They want to name a building after the mathematician who proved that brilliance transcends circumstances. Camilla smiled. Though personally, I think we should include a plaque about the time you corrected my board work. Keep me humble. Despite everything, Jonas laughed. I don't think you need help with humility anymore. Don't be so sure. I'm an academic. We're capable of profound arrogance even after being thoroughly humbled. She turned serious again. Jonas, I can't undo what I did. I can't take back the cruelty or the dismissiveness, but I can make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, Jonas assured her. People can change. You've proven that. They parted with a handshake that felt like the beginning of something. Not quite friendship yet, but mutual respect, the foundation on which something better could be built. The weeks before Lily's surgery were filled with preparation of a different kind. Jonas spent his days with her, visiting parks, reading books, making memories to sustain them both through the scary times ahead. He explained the surgery in terms an 8-year-old could understand, honest about the risks but emphasizing the expertise of the doctors, the strength of her young body, the future that awaited them both. Will it hurt? Lily asked one evening as Jonas helped her pick out a special stuffed animal to take to the hospital. For a little while, yes, but the doctors will give you medicine to help with the pain, and I'll be there the whole time. The second they let me see you, I'll be right there holding your hand. Lily selected a small teddy bear wearing a doctor's coat, a gift from Maria. Mr. Dr. Bear will help the real doctors fix my heart. I'm sure he will. The night before the surgery, Jonas couldn't sleep. He sat in the kitchen with his championship certificate, his acceptance letters from Columbia and Hawthorne Ridge, his daughter's medical charts, all the pieces of their future laid out before him. So much had changed in 4 weeks. So much was still uncertain. His phone buzzed with a message from Dr. March. Thinking of you and Lily tomorrow. She's going to be fine. She's got her father's strength. Another from Alex Chen. Good luck tomorrow, man. Lily's got this. She's tougher than any math problem. And one from Camilla. I'm not religious, but I'm praying anyway. For Lily, for you, for your family. You've both already won the hardest battle. You've stayed together, stayed loving, stayed brave. The surgery is just a technicality. See you on the other side. Jonas read the messages through blurring eyes. When had his life become full of people who cared, who supported him, who saw his worth? 5 weeks ago, he'd been invisible, working nights, struggling alone. Now he had a community, a future, hope. The surgery took place on a Tuesday morning in October. Jonas held Lily until the anesthesiologist took her, whispering promises and love into her ear. Then he was alone in the waiting room with Maria, counting minutes that felt like hours. The cardiac surgeon had explained the procedure in detail. They'd repair the damaged valve, strengthen the chamber walls, ensure proper blood flow. It was complex but routine, he'd assured them. Lily was young, healthy otherwise, an ideal candidate. 95% success rate. Jonas clung to that number through 6 hours of waiting, through the first update saying they'd begun, through the second saying the repair was progressing well, through the endless silence that followed. Finally, the surgeon emerged still in his scrubs, his face tired but smiling. Mr. Mercer? Lily did beautifully. The repair was successful. Her heart is already showing improved function. She's going to be fine. Jonas felt his knees weaken, and Maria caught him, both of them crying and laughing simultaneously. Can I see her? She's in recovery. Give us 30 minutes to get her settled in ICU. Then you can sit with her. Those 30 minutes crawled by. Jonas paced the waiting room, called Dr. March to share the news, texted his growing circle of supporters. When they finally let him into the ICU, he approached Lily's bed with a reverence usually reserved for sacred spaces. She looked so small, surrounded by machines and monitors, tubes and wires connecting her to equipment that beeped and hummed. But her chest rose and fell steadily, and when Jonas took her hand, her eyes fluttered open. Daddy? I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. Did they fix it? Did Mr. Dr. Bear help? Jonas looked at the stuffed bear tucked beside her on the bed, its doctor's coat askew. They fixed it perfectly. Your heart is going to be strong now, stronger than ever. Lily smiled drowsily, the painkillers making her eyes heavy. We won again, didn't we? Yeah, baby, we won everything. She slept, and Jonas sat beside her through the night, watching the monitors that showed her heart beating steadily, strongly, the way it was supposed to. This, he thought, was the real victory. Not the championship, or the money, or the academic recognition. This, his daughter alive and healing, her future no longer shadowed by medical uncertainty. The next morning brought a surprise visitor. Jonas looked up from Lily's bedside to find Camilla standing in the doorway, holding a large stuffed rabbit. I hope this is okay, she said quietly. I wanted to. I needed to see that she was all right. Come in, Jonas said, too tired and grateful to question it. Camilla approached the bed carefully, looking at Lily with an expression Jonas couldn't quite read. She's beautiful, Jonas. She looks like she has your stubborn chin. That's what everyone says. Jonas gestured to the chair beside him. Thank you for coming. You didn't have to. I did, actually. Camilla sat, setting the rabbit on the bedside table. I needed to see what you were fighting for, to understand what you gave up for her, what you were willing to sacrifice. She paused. I never had children. Never let myself want them. Told myself my career was enough. Looking at her now, I think I might have been lying to myself about that too. It's not too late, Camilla. You're 34. Maybe not. But watching you with her, seeing the love you have, I don't know if I could be that selfless. I don't know if I could put another person ahead of my work. She smiled sadly. That's something you taught me too. That there are things more important than being the smartest person in the room. They sat together in companionable silence, watching Lily sleep. Finally, Camilla stood to leave. The fellowship is waiting whenever you're ready. No pressure, no timeline. Your daughter comes first, But when you're able, we'd be honored to have you at Hawthorne Ridge." "I'll be there," Jonas promised. "In the spring, maybe, once Lily's recovered and stable." "Perfect. That gives us time to set up the program properly, to create the support systems these students will need." Camilla touched his shoulder briefly. "You're going to be an incredible teacher, Jonas. You understand what it means to struggle, to sacrifice, to keep loving mathematics even when life pulls you away. That wisdom, that's what our students need." After she left, Maria arrived with fresh coffee and magazines, prepared to keep vigil while Jonas took a break. But Jonas couldn't leave, couldn't tear himself away from his daughter's side. He stayed through the day as Lily gradually became more alert, through her first solid food, through the physical therapist's visit, through every small victory that marked her recovery. 3 days later, they moved her out of ICU to a regular room. A week after that, she was home, instructions for recovery care in hand, follow-up appointments scheduled. The cardiac surgeon called her recovery textbook perfect, and Jonas allowed himself to finally, fully believe it was over. The crisis that had defined their lives for years was finished. Lily would be okay. The money from the championship went exactly where it needed to go: surgery costs, medications, establishing an emergency fund for Lily's ongoing cardiac care. What remained, Jonas set aside for her education, for the future she'd now have the chance to build. And slowly, carefully, Jonas began building his own future. He accepted Camilla's fellowship offer and deferred enrollment until the spring semester. He reconnected with colleagues from Columbia, reestablished himself in the mathematical community. He gave interviews about accessible education, about second chances, about the hidden brilliance in people society had written off. The Mercer Fellowship Program launched with 5 additional slots for the following year, each one funded by a combination of university money and private donations. Applications poured in from across the country: single parents, career changers, people who'd left academia for financial reasons and wanted to return. Reading their stories, Jonas felt the weight of responsibility and privilege. He'd been given a second chance. Now he had the opportunity to provide that for others. In January, 3 months after his championship victory, Jonas attended the dedication ceremony for the new mathematics building at Hawthorne Ridge. The Mercer Center for Mathematical Excellence stood at the heart of campus, a modern glass and steel structure designed to be welcoming rather than intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows let natural light flood the interior. Study spaces were designed for collaboration. A childcare center occupied the ground floor, free for all mathematics students. Lily stood beside Jonas as the dean unveiled the plaque bearing his name. She wore a new dress Maria had bought specially for the occasion, and her color was good, her energy returning. The scar on her chest was healing well, already beginning to fade. "Look, Daddy," she whispered, pointing at the plaque. "That's your name. You're famous." "We're both famous now," Jonas whispered back. "This building is for kids like you, kids whose parents need support to keep studying, to keep growing. You inspired this as much as I did." The ceremony was attended by hundreds: students, faculty, media, and a surprising number of people who'd reached out to Jonas after his story went viral. People who'd been janitors and cashiers and factory workers while nursing dreams of education. People who'd thought their chance had passed, who'd believed society's message that they'd made their choices and had to live with them forever. Dr. March spoke at the dedication, her voice carrying across the crowd. Jonas Mercer reminded us that brilliance exists everywhere, not just in our universities and research institutions. It exists in people working night shifts to support their families. It exists in parents sacrificing everything for their children. It exists in places we've been trained not to look. This building stands as our commitment to see that brilliance, to nurture it, to give it the support it deserves. When it was Jonas's turn to speak, he stood at the podium with Lily beside him, looking out at faces that represented possibility, second chances, hope. 5 months ago, I was mopping floors in a lecture hall, believing I'd left mathematics behind forever. I thought I'd made my choice, family over career, and that choice was final. He paused, squeezing Lily's hand. But I learned something important. Life doesn't have to be about choosing between the things you love. Sometimes, with support and community and people who believe in you, you can have both. You can be a father, and a mathematician. You can work nights and still contribute to human knowledge. You can start over at 32 and build something beautiful. He looked at Camilla, sitting in the front row. I also learned that people can change, can grow, can admit they were wrong, and become better. Dr. Hartwell challenged me in the harshest way possible, but that challenge made me stronger. Her willingness to apologize, to acknowledge her mistakes, to create this program, that took more courage than solving any mathematical problem. She showed me that the real measure of a person isn't never making mistakes. It's what you do after you've made them. The applause was thunderous. Jonas saw Camilla wiping her eyes, saw Dr. March beaming, saw students who'd already enrolled in the Second Chances program standing and cheering. After the ceremony, as crowds mingled and cameras flashed, Evelyn Drake approached Jonas. He recognized her immediately, the billionaire philanthropist who'd been in the audience at the finals, who'd apparently been moved by his story. "Mr. Mercer, I wanted to speak with you." She extended her hand, her grip firm and confident. "I've been watching your journey with great interest. What you've accomplished, what Dr. Hartwell has created here, it's exactly the kind of initiative I want to support." "Ms. Drake, it's an honor." "The honor is mine. I want to fund the expansion of the Mercer Fellowship Program nationally. 20 universities, 50 positions per year, full support for non-traditional students who want to pursue mathematics and sciences." She smiled at his shocked expression. "You've proven that potential exists everywhere, that talent doesn't care about pedigree or circumstance. I want to make sure that potential has opportunities to flourish." The implications were staggering. 50 students per year, 20 universities, 1,000 opportunities over the next decade for people who'd been told they'd missed their chance. Jonas felt overwhelmed, humbled, awed by the ripple effects of one desperate decision to correct an equation on a blackboard. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help me implement it. Say you'll be the face of this program, the proof that it works." Evelyn looked at Lily. "And bring your daughter to the planning meetings. I have a feeling she has important perspectives to share." That spring, Jonas began teaching at Hawthorne Ridge. His first class was Foundations of Mathematical Thought, designed specifically for students who'd been away from formal education. The first day he stood before 20 students ranging in age from 22 to 58, former truck drivers and nurses and store managers, single parents and career changers, and people who'd always loved mathematics but never thought they'd have the chance to study it seriously. "I'm going to tell you something important," Jonas began. "You belong here. I know society sends different messages. I know people have told you you're too old, too far behind, too unrealistic. I know because people told me the same things. But those people are wrong." He wrote an equation on the board, the same one Camilla had gotten wrong, the one that started everything. Mathematics is truth. It doesn't care about your background, your age, your credentials. If you can see the truth, if you can follow the logic, if you have the courage to question and explore and make mistakes, then you can do mathematics. That's the only requirement. His students were rapt, hungry for validation, for permission to dream again. Jonas recognized their expressions, the mixture of hope and fear, the desperate want to believe combined with years of being told they couldn't. He knew that feeling intimately. Teaching, Jonas discovered, was his calling in a way research had never been. He loved watching understanding dawn in students' eyes, loved finding ways to explain complex ideas so they became clear and accessible, loved creating space where people felt safe to struggle and fail and try again. These students worked harder than any traditional undergraduates because they knew the value of the opportunity, knew how rare second chances were. One student, a 43-year-old former nurse named Patricia, stayed after class one day. "Professor Mercer, I wanted to thank you. I've loved mathematics since I was a child, but life got in the way. Family, bills, responsibilities. I thought that door was closed forever. You've reopened it." "You reopened it yourself," Jonas corrected gently. "You applied, you showed up, you're doing the work. I'm just holding the door. Still, you give us hope. You show us it's possible." She paused. "My daughter is 10. She watches me study, sees me struggling with problem sets, hears me talking about your lectures. Last week she said she wants to be a mathematician when she grows up. Because if her mom can do it, anyone can." Jonas thought about Lily, about the world she'd inherit, about the message his journey sent to kids everywhere. That's what this is all about. Not just giving individuals second chances, but changing what society believes is possible. As spring turned to summer, Jonas settled into rhythms that felt sustainable, healthy, right. Teaching 3 days a week, spending 2 days on his dissertation research, reserving weekends entirely for Lily. They went to parks and museums, took a trip to the beach, attended Maria's 75th birthday party. Lily thrived, her cardiac function improving with each checkup, her energy returning to normal childhood levels. She started playing soccer, carefully, with doctor's approval. And Jonas stood on the sidelines with other parents, cheering her on, marveling at how much had changed. A year ago, she'd been too weak to run. Now she was flying across the field, laughing, living the childhood that had been stolen by illness. In August, Jonas defended his doctoral dissertation. The topic, geometric flows with non-standard boundary conditions, was a direct extension of the work he'd done at the Euler Challenge. Dr. March flew in from Columbia to serve on his committee, and Camilla was there as well, having co-advised the research. The defense itself was almost anticlimactic after the drama of the competition. Jonas presented his results clearly, answered questions competently, and received unanimous approval. When Dr. March officially declared him Dr. Mercer, the small audience, faculty, students, Lily, Maria, Alex Chen, who'd driven down from Boston, erupted in applause. Afterward, at the celebration dinner Maria had organized, Lily climbed into Jonas's lap. "Now you're Dr. Daddy," she announced proudly. "Like the doctors who fixed my heart." "A different kind of doctor, sweetie. I fix equations, not hearts." "You fixed my heart too," Lily said seriously. "You made it so I could get better. You won that math competition so I could have surgery. That's the same thing." Jonas hugged her tightly, overwhelmed by the simple wisdom of children, by the truth she'd identified that he'd been too close to see. Yes, he'd won a mathematics competition. But the real victory was this: his daughter healthy and happy, both of them together, building a future neither had dared imagine a year ago. The following semester, Jonas accepted a tenure-track position at Hawthorne Ridge. The university created a joint appointment for him, half in the mathematics department teaching traditional courses, half directing the Second Chances program that had grown beyond anyone's initial vision. Students from across the country were applying, coming to Hawthorne Ridge specifically to study with the man who'd proven it was never too late. Jonas and Camilla developed an unexpected partnership, co-teaching seminars and designing curriculum together. The tension between them had transformed into mutual respect, even friendship. They pushed each other intellectually, challenged each other's assumptions, collaborated on research that neither could have done alone. One afternoon in October, a year after Jonas's championship victory, they sat in Camilla's office reviewing applications for the next year's Second Chances cohort. "This one," Camilla said, sliding a file across the desk. "Former construction worker, taught himself calculus using library books, wants to study structural engineering applications of differential equations. Sound familiar?" Jonas read the application, seeing his own story reflected in different details. "We're creating a movement, aren't we? Not just a program. We're changing who gets to do mathematics. That's more than a movement. It's a revolution." Camilla leaned back in her chair. "Do you ever think about that night? When you corrected my board work?" "All the time. I was so angry, so humiliated. I wanted to destroy you." She smiled ruefully. "Best thing that ever happened to me, probably. Forced me to confront who I'd become, what I'd let my fear turn me into." "Best thing that happened to me too," Jonas admitted. "I'd been sleepwalking through my life, telling myself I was content. You woke me up, reminded me that I was still a mathematician, still had something to contribute. We saved each other in a way. Maybe we did." They worked in comfortable silence, reviewing applications, making notes, planning the future. Through Camilla's window, Jonas could see the Mercer Center, students flowing in and out, studying and collaborating and building their own futures. The childcare center on the ground floor was busy, parents dropping off kids while they attended classes. The system they'd envisioned was working, creating space for people to pursue knowledge without abandoning family. That evening, Jonas picked up Lily from her after-school program. conveniently located in the Mercer Center, and they walked home together through campus. The October air was crisp, leaves turning gold and red, students hurrying to evening classes. "Daddy?" Lily asked as they walked. "Remember when you told me we won everything?" "Of course I remember." "Were you telling the truth? Did we really win everything?" Jonas stopped walking, kneeling down to her level. "What do you think, Lily? You tell me." She considered seriously, the way she always did with important questions. "Well, my heart is fixed. You're a professor now. We have enough money for everything we need. We have friends who care about us." She paused. "But the best thing is that you're happy again. You smile now, Daddy, like you used to in the pictures with Mommy." Jonas felt tears prick his eyes. "Yeah, sweetheart, we won everything. We won the things that actually matter." They continued walking, hand in hand, past the mathematics building bearing his name, past students who'd been inspired by his story, toward the small house Jonas had been able to buy with his fellowship stipend. Nothing fancy, but theirs, stable, home. Inside, Jonas helped Lily with homework while he prepared dinner. Later, after she'd gone to bed with Mr. Dr. Bear and Mr. Hopper's standing guard, Jonas sat in his small home office reviewing his research notes. He was working on a paper about the symmetry reduction technique he'd discovered during the competition, exploring its applications to other classes of problems. The mathematics flowed easily now, joyfully, the way it had when he first fell in love with the subject. His phone buzzed with a message from Dr. March. "Just received your latest draft. It's brilliant, Jonas. This is going to make waves. Proud of you doesn't begin to cover it." Another from Alex Chen. "Dude, I'm citing your competition solution in my dissertation. You literally changed the field. Also, my advisor says hi and wants to know if you're hiring postdocs because she has students who'd kill to work with you." And one from Camilla. "The Drake Foundation approved funding for another 50 fellowship positions. We're going national next year. This is happening because of you, Jonas, because you had the courage to correct my mistake. Thank you for that. Thank you for everything." Jonas set down his phone and looked around his office. Walls covered with Lily's artwork, bookshelves full of mathematics texts, his championship certificate framed above his desk. On his computer screen, equations waited to be explored, problems waited to be solved, knowledge waited to be created and shared. This was his life now. Not the life he'd imagined at 25 when he was a rising star at Columbia. Better, in ways he couldn't have predicted. Richer, deeper, more meaningful. He was a mathematician, yes, but he was also a father, a teacher, a symbol of possibility for people who'd been told they'd missed their chance. The journey from janitor to professor had been painful, humbling, transformative. It had required confronting his own doubts, facing down someone determined to break him, pushing himself further than he'd thought possible. It had required accepting help, building community, letting go of pride and bitterness. But it had also given him back himself, had reminded him that identity isn't something you lose when circumstances change. It's something you carry inside, dormant but never dead, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Jonas Mercer had been a mathematician when he was mopping floors. He'd been a mathematician when he was changing Lily's bandages. He'd been a mathematician every moment of those 5 years, even when he couldn't see it himself. The competition hadn't made him a mathematician. It had simply given him permission to remember what he'd always been. And now he had the privilege of giving that same permission to others, of saying, "You belong here. You are enough. Your circumstances don't define your potential. Start again. Dream again. Become who you were meant to be." Jonas returned to his equations, losing himself in the pure pleasure of mathematical thought. Outside, the autumn night deepened. In her room, Lily slept peacefully, her heart beating strong and steady. Tomorrow would bring classes and meetings, students and research, all the beautiful complexity of a life fully lived. But tonight, Jonas simply worked, creating knowledge, following truth wherever it led, doing what he loved most in a world he'd helped make more just. Genius, he'd learned, could wear any uniform. It could hide in unexpected places, waiting for recognition, for opportunity, for someone brave enough to say, "You matter, your mind matters, your dreams matter." Jonas had been that someone for his students. Dr. March had been that someone for him. Lily had been that someone too in her own way, giving him reason to fight, to risk, to prove that love and ambition didn't have to be enemies. And Camilla, difficult, arrogant, cruel Camilla, had also been that someone, though in the most painful way possible. She'd challenged him to prove his worth, and in meeting that challenge, Jonas had rediscovered who he was. They'd all won, in the end. One understanding, one growth, one the chance to become better versions of themselves. As Jonas wrote the final equation of his proof, he thought about all the students who would read this paper, who would learn from his technique, who would build on his work to create new knowledge. He thought about the students he'd teach tomorrow, about the lives he'd touch, about the future he and Camilla and Dr. March were building together. Mathematics, that most pure and abstract of disciplines, had led him back to what mattered most: connection, compassion, the courage to help others become their best selves. Jonas closed his notebook, turned off his desk lamp, and went to check on Lily one last time. She slept surrounded by her cheer squad, a small smile on her face, dreaming whatever dreams 8-year-olds dream. "We won, sweetheart," Jonas whispered, kissing her forehead. "We won everything that matters. And tomorrow, we get to wake up and win all over again." He left her door cracked open, light from the hallway spilling into her room, and went to bed himself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove that second chances could change the world. But tonight, Jonas Mercer, mathematician, father, professor, symbol of possibility, simply rested, content in the knowledge that impossible things could happen if you were brave enough to solve the equation, trust your truth, and never stop believing that you deserved a seat at the table. The janitor had become the professor. The dropout had become the champion. The invisible man had become impossible to ignore. And in doing so, he'd reminded the world of something it had forgotten: that brilliance doesn't have prerequisites, that excellence doesn't require permission, and that it's never, ever too late to become who you were always meant to be.